Welcome to the Lincoln City Council meeting of the 21st of August, 2017. Let's all rise for a Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a period of silent meditation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In accordance with LB 898, a copy of the Open Meetings Act is posted at the back of the chamber. The order of business of the City Council is as follows. The clerk will call the items listed on the agenda under public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on an item should come forward after the clerk reads that item. The applicant and those in favor should speak first, then those opposed. The applicant may then make one short rebuttal. Each speaker should begin by stating name, address, and whether you are speaking in favor or in opposition to the item. Testimony is limited to 5 minutes per speaker. After all public hearings, the council will vote on resolutions and items listed under third reading. On the second and last meetings of the month, immediately prior to adjournment, anyone may speak on any issue not on the agenda for that date nor planned for a future agenda. So next week will be an open mic night. Will the clerk please call the first item of business?
Yes, just a reminder to the public, due to the Labor Day holiday, there will be no City Council meeting on Monday, September 4th. We would request those giving testimony to please clearly state your name and address and to sign in on the sign-in sheet laying on the podium. Our first item is our public hearing consent agenda, items 1 through 13.
Would anyone like to testify on one of these items? Next item, please.
If not, we can vote on these items. Items 1 and 2 were introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Larry and seconded by Carl. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird? Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Items 11 and 13 were introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Or would anyone like to testify on these items? Sorry. Okay. Next item, please.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Next then are our public hearing liquor resolutions. Those giving testimony are asked to come forward, raise their right hand for the clerk to administer the oath. After the oath, witnesses shall state their names and addresses. I'll call items 14 and 15 together. They're the application of El Sultan Lounge for a Class C liquor license at 1619 O Street, as well as the related manager application. Right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
I do.
Thank you. Just state your name and address.
Saif Sayah. My business address or my
Business address is fine.
yes, 1619 O Street, Lincoln, Nebraska, 68508.
Mr. Sia, please tell us about your application.
Well, I'm trying to rebuild my business. I did that back in 2014, and my business was destroyed by fire in 2015. So I just opened for like a month and a half. So I'm just trying to do my business all over now.
Okay. Any questions from council? Thank you, sir. Okay. Best wishes.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next I'll call items 16 and 17. They're the application of Murphy Oil USA Incorporated, doing business as Murphy Express, number 8781, for a Class D liquor license at 3301 North 85th Street, and the related manager application of Jason Kubik. Would you raise your right hands? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Just state your names and addresses.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Mike Kelly, 2804 South 87th Avenue in Omaha. I have a satellite office here in Lincoln as well. And this is Jason Kubak, who's the manager. This is Murphy Oil. This is a convenience store, and we're here for any questions you might have.
Okay, questions? Okay, thank you very much. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Okay, next item, please.
All right, next is item 18, application of Babs Incorporated for a special designated license to cover an outdoor area measuring approximately 60 feet by 90 feet at the Shops at Piedmont at 1265 South Cotner Boulevard on September 29th between 10 a.m. and 11 p.m. and September 30th between 5 p.m. and 11 p.m.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'll finish that later.
Just state your name and address. No oath.
Brian Wallingford, 2230 North 60th Street.
Well, please tell us about your event.
All right, this is the third year for the Piedmont Oktoberfest. This year it features 6 different local breweries, 5 breweries and a winery that does cider. We also bring in beer from Germany and then a couple from across the city, or from across the country. We have music. We set up a 60 by 90 tent. It's a 21 or older event. We have a third party doing wristbands and a third party pouring. There will be food there. There will be water and soda available as well, so it's not only alcohol. One thing with this event that's different from the other years is on the SDL, we were contemplating the night before is the Nebraska-Illinois game. We'll already have the 60 by 90 tent. We'll already have the tables and everything. We were thinking of setting up a giant screen and projecting the game on there for free for anyone in the community that wanted to come watch it. We already have it set up, so we thought it might be a good idea. So that's why the SDL has an extra day this year than normal. We're still kind of on the fence about it, not sure about logistics, but I just wanted to make sure I had it on there to be safe.
Okay, questions from council?
Yes, I was going to ask, on Friday you said it's free?
Well, both events technically are free. You can always get into any of our events at the Shops at Piedmont, come and enjoy the entertainment, the atmosphere, all of that. The only thing that would cost would be the alcohol or the food. But all of our events are free for anyone to get in. Friday night would be in all ages, but again, we have a third party that would be doing the wristbands and a third party that would be pouring if we end up doing that event.
Thank you.
And those were my questions to confirm that was going
I
on.
thought we were going to go in free and free drinks.
I was more worried about the third party pouring on Friday.
Oh.
He sounds like he's got that under control.
Well,
so.
it's a Knights of Columbus from one of the local Catholic churches that comes and does it as a fundraiser, so.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Any other questions?
Safe and legal.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to?
Would anyone else want to testify on this item?
Mr. Chair, seeing no one coming forward, I'd move approval of items 14 through 18.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Carl. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Next then are our public hearing ordinances second reading. I'll call items 19 through 21 together. They are an ordinance authorizing and providing for the issuance of not to exceed $5,325,000 aggregate stated principal amount of general obligation stormwater refunding bonds of the cities. Ordinance authorizing and providing for the issuance of not to exceed $15,300,000 aggregate stated principal amount of sanitary sewer refunding bonds, and an ordinance authorizing the city to enter into a lease purchase transaction with Union Bank and Trust for the acquisition of streetlights for the city.
Members of the council, Brandon Kaufman, Finance Director. So the first item here is a request to proceed with issuance of GO stormwater refunding bonds. So we've got a great headline for tomorrow's newspaper. City Council saves $766,000. So anytime we come before you with refunding, it's always a great thing because we're saving the taxpayers a lot of money. So this has a principal amount of not to exceed about $5.3 million. We've got Mike Rogers with Gilmore Bell, and then also Scott Keene with Emeritus. The GFOA recommended threshold is a 3% threshold for refundings. With this one, we're approximately at 14%. So it's a great savings. We're looking at holding a competitive sell date is September 16th. And the structure of the debt is a 10-year repayment cycle, so we're staying on the current current repayment cycle. We're not extending the life of it at all. The debt savings will also be structured evenly over the life of the structure. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott, who I believe has some comments on the marketplace.
Just quickly, the bond market's been very favorable. Post-election, the 10-year Treasury rate ran from 1.75% to 2.5% in the span of about a month and a half. It was a very quick rise in interest rates, and the 10-year Treasury hung around the 2.5% and has sort of slowly trailed down from there since February, and it's today at a 2.18%, which is a new low since prior to the election. So very favorable time to be doing this financing. It's one of the reasons that we're in front of you now and trying to get to market as quickly as we can to capture this level of savings. We have meetings this week with Standard & Poor's, and on the general obligation issue, we fully expect them to affirm the AAA rating of the city. So that will make that financing very attractive. There's still great demand for tax-exempt bonds nationally, especially high credit quality issues like this one. So we think we'll have a very successful competitive sale.
Questions? John?
Yes, Mr. King, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Because you're retiring bonds, is there any prepayment penalties on these?
Great question. These bonds were actually callable June 1st of this year. So they just became callable a month or so ago at a price of 100%. So there is no premium, no penalty for refunding them early. The bondholders are aware that at any time after June 1 of 2017, they can be called away from them without a premium.
And could you walk us through where the cash comes from, where it goes, and then so forth?
Absolutely. The sources of funds are really twofold. The biggest chunk would come from the refunding bond issues, but there is also, the IRS likes to see that to the extent that the city has funds that they've collected to make the payments on the old bonds, that they allocate, that haven't been used on the old bonds, that they be used to downsize that refunding issue. So to the extent that we have money sitting in the debt service fund that would have been used for the 2007 bonds, the IRS prefers to see those monies being used to make this refunding bond issue smaller. So there's a contribution that I am estimating of about $220,000 that would come out of the Series 2007 bond fund that would be used to downsize this bond issue and make it even smaller. But those are the two sources of funds. And then they would be used generally about 35 days after the sale. The day after the sale, we ask the trustee or the paying agent to disperse a call notice. We've promised the bondholders that we would give them 30 days notice that their bonds are going to be called away from them. So generally the process is that the day after the successful sale of the bonds, that paying agent distributes that call notice, and that starts that 30-day clock. And so even though we're settling the bond issue, I apologize, even though we're settling the bond issue the week of October 23rd, even though we'd be settling the bond issue the first week of October, we wouldn't be redeeming the bonds until October 23rd, the week of October 23rd. So it takes about 35 days, about 2 weeks after the sale. The buyers want to settle the bond issue. They want to deliver the funds to you. Then you hold those funds for about 3 weeks until we hit the redemption date on the old bonds, and they're paid off at that time.
So walking through the cash flow, I believe you said the headlines tomorrow say the council saved how much?
$766,000.
Okay, so we saved $766,000 in interest, right? I want to put words in your mouth.
I would add to that slightly that we'll know what the savings are at the time we go to market with the bonds. So we really won't know until the bonds are sold that week of September 18th what the exact interest rates are, what the exact savings are. But our conservative estimate of those savings is about $760,000.
So we could
present
save more.
value. I think we've had this discussion before as well. Generally, we look at refundings by looking at the savings in today's dollars, not the savings spread over the life of the issue, because a dollar of savings we're getting 10 years from now isn't worth as much as a dollar of savings we'd be getting today. So we by convention, discount all of those savings over the life of the issue to today's dollars, and that's the $760,000 that Brandon mentioned.
Present value is that, and what discount rate did you use?
Use the discount rate, the all-in rate rate on the refunding bonds, which is also by convention the appropriate rate to use, of 1.97%.
Okay. And so you said you anticipate an additional $220,000 saved.
No, there really won't be savings associated with that because that's a contribution, that's monies that the city has to pay out. So what happens is that we're reducing the size of the bond issue by $220,000, but the city is making that contribution as part of the refunding, so it's only fair to count that as a cost to the city. So the city's making the contribution, we have bond proceeds, and when you compare the debt service payments of the old bonds to the debt service payments of the new bonds, including that $220,000 contribution, that's how the savings are calculated.
And Mr. Kaufman, so with that $766,000 present value, where does that money go?
That money would come out of the debt service fund, so in the future, when budgets are adjusted, we would adjust accordingly to the payments.
So it would go into the debt service fund and become a balance there?
Or we lower the levies or the tax rate for that specific fund.
I like the latter. So another way we can lower the tax levy?
That's correct.
Would that be like another 1 mil?
Oh.
Unfortunately,
no.
The savings associated with this financing we're currently estimating about $80,000 per year, so it would not have a significant impact on the tax levy of the city, but every bit helps, and clearly by saving this, it is lowering the tax burden, even if it is a modest amount per household.
I would bet if I asked our audience here if $80,000 is significant, every hand would go up. Thank you.
Happily shared amongst all 290,000 of us.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item?
Are we talking about the first one or all three?
Now we're going on to the next item.
Okay. Okay, so the next item we have is a request to proceed with issuance of sanitary sewer revenue refunding bonds. So the source of funding here would be a sanitary sewer wastewater fund. So any savings would impact that fund with a principal amount of not to exceed $15.3 million. Same thing, GFO recommends a 3% threshold. Currently, we're estimating somewhere around 13%. The debt service savings would be $1.9 million. Once again, that's an estimate until the actual prices come in on the bid date.
Present value?
What's that?
Present value again?
Yes. The structure of the debt is there's 15 years currently left on the repayment. That would stay the same in this case, so we're not extending it beyond the current life of the debt. The savings are also structured over the life of the remaining of the bonds.
The only two things I would add is that the outstanding 2007 sewer revenue bonds have an average rate of 4.39%, and our conservative estimate of the current rates would be we'd be replacing those bonds with new bonds having a rate of approximately 2.5%. So a pretty significant drop. I failed to mention on the GO issue, we're dropping from about 4.76% on the old bonds to our estimate of 1.87%. So a pretty, as you can see, a pretty dramatic change in interest rates from when the bonds were issued. Again, we're meeting with both Moody's and Standard & Poor's on this financing this week, and again, fully expect them to affirm our outstanding ratings of AA1 from Moody's and AA+ from S&P.
Cindy?
Yeah, could you just give us the annual on that one? You gave us 80,000 last one.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
I was trying to remember all the things that I might have mentioned.
210,000.
About $156,000 per year over the 15 years of this financing.
15, that's the difference.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the same analysis that I mentioned with regards to the contribution. If we follow the IRS sort of gentle recommendation of an amount to contribute from the existing debt service funds, we'd be contributing about $1.3 million.
Okay. Other questions? Would anyone like to testify on number 20? So you can go on to 21.
Okay. The next item, number 21, is a request to proceed with the issuance of certificates of participation, or commonly referred to as COPS, for street light purchases. That would be in a principal amount not to exceed $3.775 million, which would generate approximately $3.6 million for projects for street lights. So we've got represented also from Public Works that are going to be available for questions in LES. The structure of the debt would be over a 10-year repayment cycle with level debt service payments.
Okay. Questions? John?
Since you're our fairly new finance director, you've probably heard a little bit, though, about the past dialogue on COPS bonding, certificates of participation, and the fact we've gone from a substantially low or very low amount up to about 38 million currently. Had been as high as 43 million, but it had been earlier, I think 10 years ago or so, around $1 million. If the council does not approve using certificates of participation, which do not require the vote of our citizens, what would be another avenue to handle this funding?
Well, I think you've got probably two ways to fund this. You've got cash contributions through the budget, or a debt or funds coming from debt. So this is, I know in the street lights, this has been an annual amount that goes to fund the improvements of enhancements in the community for the street lights, putting items underground, and general maintenance. Without this debt funding, we'd have to make some type of cash allocation from the budget to be able to continue meeting the needs of street light maintenance in the community.
And you said the annual payment would be how much?
Approximately $420,000. And all that's an estimate, same until we go to market. And
Okay, Jane?
I don't know if, Brandon, if this would be your topic to talk about the electrical savings that we would see by installing the LED lighting.
And on that, I think I will defer to Public Works.
Okay.
Randy Hoskins, Assistant City Engineer. Basically, when we look at LED street lighting, we can figure that for the electricity usage alone, we're probably going to save about 50 to 60% per fixture. There's certain fixtures that are higher than that, some that'll be a little lower. Then there's also a savings when we go to LEDs of also the maintenance costs that LES charges us. And so there's kind of a twofold savings when we go to LED street lights.
So have you calculated the return on investment by adding these additional street lamps or upgrading the existing ones by using LED light fixtures?
If we were to do a change out of the whole city, there's about 10 to 11% of the existing street lights that have already been switched over to LEDs. If we were to do the rest of them, it's estimated that would cost around $11 million. Now, we would also get back then about our costs would be reduced by about $1.1 million a year. And so the payback on such a thing would be a little less than 10 years.
So I guess the question, I would like to see a little more specific kind of answer. We're talking about $420,000 a year for this project. What does this project save us a year in electrical and maintenance?
Well, and here's maybe where it needs clarified. This is not for an LED changeover.
Okay.
There will be new systems built, new signals, or new traffic street lights put up, excuse me, that will be put up as a result of the projects that LES will be doing. And so each of those will result in the savings for that. But this is more for things like when Public Works does a project and we put street lights in with it. It's when any sort of unexpected maintenance goes on. A pole gets hit by a vehicle, has to be replaced. We do replacements every year for poles that are beyond their useful life. those sorts of things. So in each of those cases, we will be putting in LED heads with each one of those, but overall, this is not, that's not the main point of this money that we're talking about.
John?
You confused me by your last comment or two. We're looking at 3.775 million, and that, I'll let you say how many poles that would replace. Well, the note I got back from you was 800 to 1,000.
That is an average number per year, that 800 to 1,000 of the existing
33,000
luminaires would be changed out. But that's things like when a light goes out and LES goes out and puts a new one up, they put up an LED head now. And so we're talking about things like miscellaneous streetlight relocations. If there's a location where the light is not doing its job and we need to change it, then this money could pay for that. And there again, when that goes up, it will be a new LED head. Talking about things like rebuilds, like we've been doing along 70th Street, because those poles were old and about, concerns with them falling down. Again, every one of those would be replaced with an LED head. But this is not specifically to go out and start replacing just the heads.
So this is really a maintenance element, and then in the process of maintaining, where appropriate, you'd replace the current incandescent head or whatever with an LED.
Mm-hmm. I would say this is more of a heavy maintenance cost, if you will. We do pay a certain amount each year based on what it costs LES to put in or to fix and repair and maintain the system. We do pay that separately. That's about $1 million a year, and that comes out of general fund. But then this is kind of what I would call the heavier type maintenance, those things that are not just scheduled sorts of things. These are kind of beyond that.
I'm kind of vague on my recollection of numbers, but am I right that approximately $3 million a year is paid to LES on streetlights, and is that all for the electricity, or is that for a combination of electricity and the repair and maintenance of the existing?
There's about $2.2 million a year that's paid to LES. About $1 million of that is electrical costs, and then about 1.3 million or 1.2 million is the maintenance that we pay to them.
Say those numbers again, please.
It's about $1 million for electricity and about 1.2 million for the maintenance.
So you're saying when Ms. Raybould, Council Member Raybould, was asking you about the whole fleet, or you said all the remaining 90% of the 33,000 streetlights that aren't LED, if you went ahead and did those, you said that would cost about $11 million, and we'd be a 1.1 a year savings from LES. So we currently pay 2.2 million to LES, 1 million is for the electricity, and 1.2 million is for the maintenance. How do we achieve half of that? In other words, reduce that to 50%.
Again, we're looking at 50 to 60% average savings in electricity, and then we will also see a savings in maintenance costs from LES, because the average incandescent, or the type of lights that they're using now, they're not incandescent, generally lasts probably 5 to 7 years, something like that. An LED head will last 20 years. So there's a lot less maintenance that will be required of LES in order to keep the system updated. And so that's where we will see savings on that.
But you're paying already this 2.2 million, and now you want to pay an extra 3.7 million, 3.8 million, like you said, heavy maintenance. So with the 1.2 million, what are we getting?
I'm sorry?
What do we get with the current 1.2 million we pay every year?
That is primarily, I don't know, do you want to take it, Jeff?
Hello, Jeff Lawatch with Lincoln Electric System. I supervise the streetlight department. To answer your question, Mr. Camp, the maintenance costs, so there's a difference between capital costs versus maintenance costs. So our maintenance costs that LES bills for in our monthly billing rate is for things like lamp changeouts. That's a non-capital cost. Locating underground cable so it doesn't get hit by contractors. That's a non-capital cost. Pole painting, pole inspections, those are non-capital costs. So those are the types of things that we do with that monthly bill or monthly rate.
What if I hit a street light and it knocks the pole over? Is that capital or maintenance?
That depends. Now, typically, carpool accident would be paid for by the insurance company, but of course, we get hit and runs on occasion. In that case,
do that too.
I hopefully you wouldn't do that, but that does happen on occasion. We try to work it out with the individual who hit the pole, and their insurance company typically will cover those expenses. But that would be a new pole and a new head assembly, typically in most instances, which would be a capital investment if we were to, if the city were to have to pay for replacement of that. So new poles, new head assemblies, new underground facilities, new wire, new conduit, new pole bases, those things are capital expenses, and that's what the certificate of participation funding is typically used for. To give you an idea, this year we rebuilt 70th Street from O Street all the way down to Old Post, okay, and that included new conduit, new pole bases, you know, everything. It's a full rebuild. That those facilities needed to be updated so we can prevent poles from falling over, things like that. So some other areas we also took care of was Northwest 12th Street and Highland Boulevard. And so those projects, just those 3 rebuild projects for this year alone, total to be about $1.5 million.
Okay. Cindy and then Benny.
Thank you. Okay, so I had a couple questions. One is I'm still having a struggle with what on our agenda it says to acquisition of streetlights. So I'm looking for maybe, because this is bonding that the citizens don't vote on, if we were putting it in front of the citizens for a vote, can you give me the 1 or 2 sentences? What are we going to tell them it's for?
I'll do my best to explain that one, I guess. The certificate of participation that's being requested is typically for street widening projects where we have to relocate poles, brand new roads or streets that are being installed where new poles are required to be installed, and rebuild areas like we just discussed on 70th Street. Basically, any new pole and new luminaire that goes in, any of those capital expenses, that's what this certificate of participation funds on a yearly basis.
And over what period of time is this expected to be spent?
I don't know if you want to.
I think annually it's probably somewhere from 2 to 3.5 million annual spend. I mean, it's fairly significant. That's why I think we come back on an annual basis to fund the COPS for streetlights.
So this is for 1 year's streetlights?
Yes.
And then you're going to come back next year and ask for another 10-year bond payment for 1 year's worth of streetlights?
Correct.
Okay. When you mention the $420,000, is that principal and interest? Is that the complete debt service for this per year?
Yes.
Over 10 years, is that what you said?
Correct.
Thank you. And you had been kind enough to provide us with some information, thank you, about the COPS bonds in the past. I appreciate that. One of the things you sent us was a pie chart of where those bonds have been spent. And I had a question about the 11 million that was indicated was for miscellaneous. Can you tell me what's included? It was a pretty big chunk. It was like 39% or something.
That wouldn't be miscellaneous. That would be MSC.
Oh, okay. So can you tell us what that is then? I misunderstood. I'm sorry.
Yes. So that kind of blue chunk that has 11.685 million. That's the outstanding principal balance for the MSC at 31% of the overall total.
That's the center out there on Bond Street?
Yes.
Okay. And then it looks to me like we paid off, last year, we paid off, what, 6.89 or almost 6.9 million in principal and interest on these bonds, is that right?
Approximately, yeah.
Okay, and so there are a few of them that are they falling off? Is that
That's correct.
Okay.
And let's say if you approve this one, I think at the end of last year, I said we were sitting somewhere about 37 million. You know, you'd add 3.7, but you're also having payments drop off. So I estimated it'd be somewhere about 36.6 million by the end of next year.
And then we got a letter today that indicates that the bond indebtedness that the people have voted on is about 45 million.
I believe that's correct.
Is that accurate?
That would be the general obligation outstanding balance.
Is 40, and that's when the people vote on their bonds, the bonds that they have voted to support.
Yes.
Okay, and then, and we're at 37 million right now. Before this, 37 million that has not been voted on by the people, but that we've bonded.
Correct.
Is that accurate? Okay, thank you.
Benny?
Thank you. Randy, sure, thank you. Randy, I'd like to talk with you about the percentage of LEDs right now. And I was excited. I thought we were going to put a lot more out. I understand we're going to do some more maintenance, but there will be an increase in the number of LED lights through this maintenance process. What about that and new developments? Does this also include new subdivisions that are being built and lights that go in?
Yes, in the past, I believe it's been a year or so, we changed the city's code to require that any new streetlights that go up are now LEDs. So yeah, any new subdivisions around the edge of town, those will all be LEDs.
And does that come out of this fund, or
No,
it comes out of a different?
No, that is paid for by the developer, and so, yeah, those are sort of free to us.
That sounds like fun. And so right now, we look at the 11% that are there already, 90% is what we need to go to be at 100% LED. That number is going to be shaved off a little bit by this heavy maintenance. Would that be fair?
Right, yeah, over time. You know, we've talked about, should we wait and go over time and just kind of through attrition move to all LEDs, or should we try to do a heavier lift and try to get it done sooner? And so we have been in contact, looking at some folks that could possibly do that for us. And so we're talking about them right now. Part of that we'll look at what sort of financing we can find to do that as well.
And that number, if I remember, Councilman Camp's number is like 11 million to replace everything.
Yes.
Okay, other questions? I have a question. Oh, John, go ahead.
Thank you. On that 11 million, what if we just went and did the whole thing and go to the people for a vote on that, if it saves so much? That's only triple what you're asking for now.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly something we could do. We still would need those capital type expenditures that Jeff was talking about, though. And so we would still need.
But shouldn't that be financed out of our general budget as it is? And out of that 3 million or 2.2 million we pay to LAS every year?
That's Brandon's call. He's got to come up with that.
Because we used to do this just on an annual basis, cash flow. We didn't use COPS and all.
Well, I think before it was done on an annual basis, the charges were coming from LES. And I think the one thing that Don Hurst looked at was, you know, those rates were substantially higher than what the city could finance them at through the COP program. So that's what started the city issuing COPs, because we could save money from the rate that LES was charging.
Doesn't LES have the same bond ratings we have, since it's our subsidiary?
They would be a little bit higher than us, but Scott, could you give any background?
Yeah, I'm not an expert on LES's credit, but I do know they're a AA rated utility, and for a AAA rated city, to have property tax backstopping a COPS financing means the rate's significantly lower than a AA rated revenue issue. So our cost of borrowing, the city's cost of borrowing for COPS is lower than LES's cost of borrowing for their revenue bonds. And I think they weren't necessarily passing along to the city what their cost of borrowing was. I think it was higher than that.
Well, we do get the LES dividend now of $9 million a year. What about with that prior item we talked about on the sanitary sewer refunding of $15.3 million? What if we went out and did $26.3 million and do a GO bond, and that way we get that lower rate? Yes,
I defer to bond counsel as to our ability to do general obligation bonds for a revenue project, but clearly the borrowing rate would be lower
I think the sanitary sewer.
Introduce yourself, please.
Thank you. Mike Rogers with Gilmore and Bell Bond Counsel to the city. The sanitary sewer financing is a revenue bond issue, so it's not compatible with the. It's not the same. It's not the AAA credit that we were talking about with the COPS issue.
How about a GEO bond?
Could you do a GEO bond for
streetlights?
No, sanitary sewer.
Or some way to make them in the same pot so we can get the issuance costs and everything?
To do a GEO bond for the sanitary sewer financing, is that?
Well, I'm trying to look at a way that maybe it'd be better just to do all the LED conversion now, but do a bonding so that people can have their say on that, but do it for the combined sanitary and for the LED. So a total about 26.3 million.
Or the combined storm sewer and LED? The storm sewer is the general obligation bond issue that was approved.
Oh, okay, sure, that'd be fine.
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to.
Maybe I misspoke, I apologize.
No, that's fine. I was just trying to.
You tell us you're our bond counsel.
Make sure I understand the direction we were headed. Yeah, if there were, I think the storm sewer refunding issue is obviously a general obligation bond that was voted on by the electorate in 2007, I believe, and so the proposal now is just to refund those bonds soon to capture the interest savings before markets change. To do a bond election, yes, if we had voter approval to do another general obligation bond issue, we could combine that with this. That would be fine. I guess the question is whether you could do streetlights as a general obligation bond issue, and I would have to look into that. I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head.
I think I might have something to, I'm sorry, now that I understand exactly what you're asking, Mr. Camp. The differential in interest rates between the city's AAA certificates of participation and your AAA general obligation rating is probably something between maybe 5 and 10 basis points, or 5 or 10 1/100%. So if the borrowing rate for your GEO bonds was 2.5%, for the COPS it might be 2.55 or 2.6%. It's just a very slight differential. On this financing that's being proposed at the current rates, a 10 basis point difference in interest rates, so sort of the outside range of that, would mean that if we were to vote this issue and use the city's AAA rated general obligation bonds, we'd save about $18,000 over the 10-year life of the financing, or about $1,800 per year, by doing them as general obligation bonds rather than as COPS. That's sort of what I see as kind of the outside realm. It's probably a little bit less on shorter maturities, and probably maybe getting out to 8, 9, 10% on the, or 10 basis points on the longer maturities. So it's not a huge difference, and I think you have to analyze the costs of doing an election against that as well. But if you're doing a mathematical calculation trying to compare them, I think probably have to include that in the analysis as well. Would be a little bit of savings on interest rates, but not huge, mostly because the city has such a strong AAA rating on its COPS financings.
But it sounds, from what I'm pulling together here, that if we did the whole LED thing now, did a citizen vote on that for $1,800 a year, that's, my goodness, we do that and we save $500,000 a year in at least in energy savings. Of 60%, $600,000 a year, and we get it done, and then we don't have to do these COPS every year for $3 or $4 million. I kind of like that better.
I think that's still preliminary in the process. They're working with a company that's an ESCO firm to really analyze and go more in depth on the LED analysis. So I don't think we're at a point in time where we're ready to step forward on that. We are at a point in time where I think we've got $60,000 left remaining in COPS funding that do the capital type projects for streetlights. So we're going to run out of money shortly for streetlights. So at some point we need to make a decision to move forward. Holding off, I'm not sure how much longer in the process it would take for an ESCO. Do you have any estimate?
I think based on the work that's been done, we may be coming forward with a contract on that, possibly even within the next few months. So,
Gosh, why do this? Hell, we have LES and its crews too. They can be their own in-house ESCO for us. I mean, I'm really serious on this, that it seems wise that with energy savings, being efficient there, that we're being good to the environment, good to the taxpayers. I just don't like this. You talk about this continual COPS financing, and that's debt finance government.
I have a question kind of related to that then. Does the city have a debt management policy that guides us in how we do these things?
The city does not currently have a debt service policy in place. I think that's one thing that since I've come here, I've drafted and we've been working on, and hope to take that out soon. Typically, though, debt service policies aren't structured to limit by instrument. Typically, they're broader indicators of overall debt. So you're looking at global stuff like debt service as a % of your total valuation of the city, or you're looking at debt service expenditures compared to total governmental expenditures. So it typically doesn't limit things by instrument type, because when you do limit things by instrument type, there's also other instruments that can be utilized typically. So then you're shifting from one to the other. So I would recommend that when you're looking at a debt service policy, that you're looking at it more from a global indicator standpoint.
Do you have an anticipated timeline of when that policy would be ready?
I think we've got it drafted now, and probably we could bring it before the council in the next 1 to 2 months.
Jane?
Can you talk to us a little bit about why Lincoln has such a stellar bond rating of AAA on all their financing? I mean, how do many municipalities achieve such a high level of quality of bonds?
Well, there's a number of things that go into the rating. Economy, we have a strong economy. We have a very strong management rating. They look at our budget, they look at liquidity on hand, debt service compared to overall expenses. And also they look at contingent or other post-employment benefits like pension liabilities. And also they look at the state framework that the state constitution sets out for cities, for taxing abilities, and they summarize all that. And currently we're a AAA rated for our general obligation. Even with a AAA rated, they take into impact capital leases or like COPs and how those impact the overall budget. So they look at it from a global perspective.
So even without a debt policy, we still have a AAA bond rating?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Other questions? Larry?
It sounds like there's some concerns among some council members about these items. And so can you help us understand, if this item were to fail tonight, what the practical implications are for the city?
Got to be more.
Well, it's not going to be voted on tonight.
Well, fail.
Yeah, I guess the question would come how we would pay for those sorts of things that are typically paid for. Again, the capital type items that Jeff was talking about earlier. How would we pay for those?
Well, I think maybe we start with the question: if we didn't have funding tomorrow, which we've got about $60,000 in cash currently, what would be the result on the heavy capital side from an LES standpoint?
That's probably difficult for me to answer from a financial standpoint because I'm not in our financial department and I don't know how we would handle billing. These large projects are currently under construction. We bill for them monthly. $60,000 probably won't scratch the bill for next month, considering 70th Street's coming to a close. And again, that was like an $800,000 project to the best of my recollection. So if you think about that billing coming through, and we only have $60,000 in funds to cover that bill coming through, I'm not sure, I guess, between LES and the city, how they would deal with that financial concern.
I think I'll follow up on it. So from a financial standpoint, like I mentioned, we've got 60,000 funds left. We have bills coming in. So if there are not funds approved, I think we'd have to go back to the table to figure out how we could scrounge up some money. I think as Steve Hubka said, dig through the couch cushions to try to fund streetlight projects in the community.
So you're just kind of assuming the city council will keep approving these every year, and you get down to 60,000 each year, and so we have to do another 3 or 4 million of these.
I think from a staff standpoint, we're coming with a recommendation to finance it.
But shouldn't this have come a lot earlier? You could see the time path of what these expenses are.
These were included in the annual operating budget. So I think that would
Ops
be...
bonds were included in the operating budget?
Yes, for issuance for this year. So that would, to me, that's the planning perspective of, it was included in the annual budget. Now we're coming forward with a financing proposal.
So you could do it some other way, do a vote of the people or something like some of these other alternatives we talked about. It wasn't COPS. And again, there's been a lot of dialogue on the COPS not wanting to go higher. In fact, we shave them down so we get into a much lower level. Maybe not as low as the million we used to have, but.
I think that's definitely a policy consideration for the governing body to decide whether COPS are appropriate or GO bonds are appropriate.
But it sounds like, to me, that we've already approved the budget that included this form of financing in it already.
No.
So, and we've already committed the funds to go ahead forward with these projects. So absent a different type of mechanism in place, we have to go with what is being presented, what has already been approved by all of us in the budget to move this forward.
Budget doesn't approve COPS fund. You're just saying you anticipated this funding from some source. Is that not what you said a moment ago?
It was included in the operating budget as a plan to issue COPs for streetlights in the 2016 to 2018 biennium budget.
So why are you coming to us today to ask us to approve it, if it was approved in the biennial budget?
We have to have city council approval through an ordinance to issue bonds or to issue the COPs.
So it wasn't approved in the biennial budget?
I think it was planned for during the biennial budget, but any type of issuance of bonds requires city council approval.
Okay, other questions? Larian?
Well, COPs have been issued for streetlights, sidewalks and fiber, and going back as far as 2007 at least. Do you know the history? I mean, it looks like we've issued 2007, 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16, and 17, with some of it being a rolling thing where you just transfer budgeted payments to the new issues. Is that correct, how it's been working?
That'd be a correct statement.
It's a pattern that's been going on for 10 years, and it's certainly, we have to list anticipated funding sources in the budgets. I think that's what Brandon's saying, is that this was transparently, delineated in the budget as the anticipated way to move forward. But, we do have, coming up in January and February, March and April, a plan to have lengthy budget discussions, sort of by topic area, and how we finance some of these things, and whether or not we want to have a policy discussion. I think there's a real appropriate time for having an even lengthier discussion about that if you want to, and maybe that's something you could make a note of, that we want to talk about that in the future.
Okay. Other questions? Thank you. Next, would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next is item 22, approving the closeout of completed construction projects and transfer of unspent appropriations and cash, if any, from various projects to projects where additional funding is needed within the Public Works and Utilities Department and the Parks and Recreation Department.
I'm Mickey Esposito, Director of Public Works and Utilities, and actually I'm standing in for Brandon since he's in the back. I think this is finances legislation, but if you have any questions for us, I'll have him join me as well. But we can respond to the Public Works items.
Questions? Cindy?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that the figures that are in this legislation are stated in thousands, is like the transfers from one fund to another?
I don't believe so. I
Okay.
have to look at the legislation.
Okay,
myself.
so, like the well field, the first
Mhm.
one was the well field, was
Oh.
$744.02, or
Yes.
is that?
It's $744.02.
Oh, okay, it's
that small.
$744.02.
Mhm.
It's the actual, okay.
Yes, that's the
So,
actual.
and so the Wellfield project is the one that we actually got additional funding for after the budget was passed, correct?
Yeah, and I'll bring up Donna Garden to talk a little bit about how that was partially funded with grant dollars. Oh, here he is. Did you have any introductory?
Donna Garden, Public Works and Utilities. It is $744.02. We were closing out that project that the money is coming from, and we're just putting it on the well field that's currently under construction. And that well field that is under construction did get the additional Water Sustainability Fund money of $7.6 million from the state.
Okay, so this is actually going to the one that's now being built that has the additional funding?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
John?
And that was how much for the well field on that grant?
The actual grant amount was $7.6 million. The total project is about twice that amount. I don't know the exact figure there.
So the city saved that $7.6 million?
Correct.
And I recall several months ago, there was some discussion in private about what to do with that savings. Was anything ever done?
We had looked at additional water main replacement, I believe, is one of the options, and some other things. We also have bonding coming up in the future. We're hoping not to bond for as much money to keep our rates low.
I believe those will be discussed in the next budget cycle too. Whatever projected uses of that savings will be discussed in the next budget cycle, if that makes any sense, where we talk about rates and whether to issue new bonds.
$3.775 million?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your
Could we
question.
use $3.775 million to do some streetlights?
Well, unfortunately, it's a color of money issue, and you have certain legalities associated with certain types of funding, and water rates can't be used for street lighting, so sorry about that.
Color of money.
Yeah, color of money.
Cindy?
I'm sorry, thank you. So what is the savings in this cycle from the $7.3 million grant?
As we get a bill, an invoice on the construction that's going on out there, I think it's a 60-40 split between the city and the grant money. So we submit that money to the Department of Natural Resources, and they provide refunds as that money is spent. So if it doesn't cost the entire amount, then we will get less than that. But that was what was originally granted to us at the beginning.
So how much did we budget for it last year and this year that we're not going to have to pay? Because we had some kind of debt service.
We had in our CIP,
right?
We had the full amount of the project, which I think was approximately $14 million.
I believe that's right.
And that included bank stabilization for our current island. It included the transmission main that goes under the Platte and the well field, or the well 14 to the new horizontal collector well.
And then when we raised the rates, there was a percentage of that rate that was supposed to go towards that service for that project, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and that's the number I'm after. For last year and this year, how much is that? For 16, 17, and 17, 18?
The rate increase?
The savings, what we had set aside, what we collected extra that we didn't have to use for its intended purpose.
I don't know the exact number there in terms of how much money has been spent so far.
Yeah, so how it works is that we will expend the dollars to build the well, and then we'll submit for reimbursement. And when we receive those proceeds back on the grant, that's when we'll know what kind of savings we truly have. And that reimbursement request will be up to the $7 million.
So how much have we collected so far on that rate increase related to this project?
We haven't submitted any for reimbursement
She's
yet.
talking about rate
Yeah, the rate increases, certain percentage rate increase.
And I want to emphasize also, that was for our entire operating budget and our entire CIP. And it also goes to debt service. We are planning to have a revenue bond issuance here coming up very soon because our capital improvement program is very sizable. It included, and it will be reduced, that amount that we have to bond, will be reduced by a certain amount. So future rate increases may be impacted by that, but I don't think we're seeing an impact at this moment in time.
I thought we had a discussion when it came in, well, that there was going to, for the 16-17, it wasn't a full year of rate increases, but that about $230,000 of it was anticipated for the well field. And then it would be, I'm guessing, grown the following year because we would have the full year of rate. And that's the number I'm looking for. Can you just get that to me at some point?
I can
Thank you.
certainly get that
Thank you.
information to you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Other questions? Would anyone else like to testify, like our Parks Director?
I am certainly, Lynn Johnson, Lincoln Parks and Recreation. I'm certainly available for questions this evening. And just so the council knows, this is kind of the annual cleanup ordinance that we work with Public Works to put together to look at projects that may have remaining funds and then transferring those to other projects. We work very closely with finance to put that together. And so this is kind of that annual process of looking at the CIP and adjusting funds as needed. And again, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
John.
I have to congratulate you coming up with a savings of 40 cents in one project and 7 cents in the other and reallocating that.
That is a very detailed accountant in our section right now, where our department, we're very pleased to have that.
Just to account for that, but thank you for your honesty.
Okay, would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next I'll call items 23 through 35, as they are all personnel items. We have amending Chapter 2.76 of the Lincoln Municipal Code relating to personnel system by amending Section 2.76.040 definitions to clarify language regarding what constitutes a promotion for employees, amending 2.76 relating to the personnel system by amending Section 2.76.370 authorized holidays to amend language regarding personal holiday increments, amending pay schedules for certain employee groups by adjusting the pay range schedules for employees whose classifications are assigned to the following pay ranges. The letters E, W, X, P, N, A, C, B, and M, all to be effective August 24th, 2017. We also have amending the pay schedule for the X classifications to delete the classifications of Legal Secretary 1, Employment Clerk, and Benefits Clerk. An ordinance revising and simplifying the excluded X pay plan. And that's it.
Doug McDaniel, Human Resources, sorry, and Nicole Gross, Compensation Manager, Human Resources. The first ordinance, 17102, is clarifying language which identifies what truly a promotion is. While as simply as that may seem, we had some consternation from customers as they were doing reallocations and wanting to maybe do a different percentage than what a promotion allows for. So we insert language into the code that identifies strictly that a promotion is in which a vacancy exists and is filled through a competitive process. So it just makes it very clear and distinguishes it from another reallocation process internally. Questions?
John?
I'm kind of a financial guy. Could you go through each of these and tell us what savings or what extra costs are the result of them?
Well, sure. I mean, I'll speak to those. Which one are you, I mean, you're talking about all of the different
the 12 or
pay changes, or I was going through each ordinance, John, so I mean.
You don't want a time. That
well, I can speak to them all if you'd like, you know, so.
Might as well.
Okay, very good. All right. 17103 is a change to the code, which basically is cleanup that speaks to what increments personal holiday time can be used, and whether it's 2 hours or less. We basically move that for all areas except for the M's. 17104, this is the annual change for cost of living for the excluded E groups. These are unrepresented. It's a 2.5% increase to this pay plan. 17 employees are involved in this at a cost of $39,112, which is in the budget. 17105, amends the pay schedule for the Ws. These are unrepresented W class to a 2.0% adjustment to the pay plan. There are 43 people in this pay plan at a cost of $96,760. 1711 is cleanup. We eliminate classification from the X unrepresented pay plans that are no longer being used. 17106 amends the pay schedule for the unrepresented X pay plan and simplifies it. It's a 2.5% increase. 17 employees are impacted at a cost of $29,676, which is in the budget. 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35. I can list each one of those individually, but those are basically the second year of any negotiated contract, which you've already approved. This just approves the pay plan for that second year of the contract. And if you'd like me to go through each one of them, I certainly will. I'm seeing a nod from Mr. Camp. So
You would like it.
okay. 17107, excuse me, I apologize. I skipped 17107. That's an ordinance with revising and simplifying the excluded pay plan. What we do in this particular pay plan that's excluded, it historically followed the N pay plan of Page. Historically, it had 70 pay grades for, again, about 20 different classifications because it just followed that pay plan. We simplify it through Ms. Gross's work to 20 pay ranges and simplify it. We'll probably make up the savings in paper. So 17112, amending the pay schedule for P, which is LPU. That is a 3.25% increase. 17113, that's the N, that's...
1 second, how many employees and what's the dollar cost on that?
Nicole, I don't know that we have the dollar cost. Again,
295 employees.
we don't have the actual dollar cost. It would be in, obviously it's in the budget because it's the second year, but we didn't calculate the cost for that, for each one that was already in the budget. Okay? It'll be the same for all these unionized plans, John. So 17113, that is the Page contract. 2.5% was negotiated, and this will be the pay plan for the second year of that contract. 17114, that is the A's under the LCEA. That'll be 2.4%. And then 17115 is the C's within that same union, LCEA. They have both A and C pay plans. 2.4% increase. 17116 is ATU. So the B pay plan is 2.25% increase. And 17117, the pay schedule for the LMCEA pay plan is 1.7%.
Lyrian has a question.
Sort of similar, just maybe put it a different way. Are any of these changes that you're discussing with us tonight that you proposed, any of them not budgeted for, any of them in excess of what was budgeted?
No.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to testify on this item, or any of these items? Next item, please.
All right, next is item 36, change of zone 17017, application of Alpha Epsilon Association of Theta Xi to designate the Zeta Xi Fraternity House as a landmark, changing the zoning district from B4 to B4 Lincoln Center Business with Landmark Overlay on property located at 1535 R Street.
Hi, thank you. I'm Eric Hemmingson, 1535 R Street. I represent the corporate board of the Alumni Association. We own the house. We would respectfully request that you approve the historic landmark designation as was unanimously recommended by the Planning Commission.
Okay, any questions?
Thank you.
Very much. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next are items 37 and 38. They are text amendment 17011, amending Title 27 of the Lincoln Municipal Code by amending Section 27.63.110, relating to the approval of a special permit for garden centers in the AG zoning district, to provide that the City Council may allow more than one freestanding sign per frontage for garden centers when two or more tenants/lessees operate the garden center on behalf of the owner, and the tenants/lessees have separate entrances along the same frontage, and repealing 27.63.110 as hitherto existing. And we also have special permit 06022A, application of William Allen LLC to amend special permit 06022 to allow a garden center operated by two tenants lessees of the owner to have two freestanding signs on South 14th Street, with one sign located at each tenant lessee entrance on property generally located at 10901 South 14th Street.
Hello, I'm Tony Persons. I'm with Nebraska Sign Company. We applied for the special permit amendment, as well as the request for the text amendment. So I'm here to offer or answer any questions you may have.
Questions? Appear to be none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item or these two items? Next item, please.
All right, next we have a public hearing, ordinance third reading, item 39, change of zone 17011, application of Roger H. Swissow Revocable Trust for a change from AG Agricultural to R3 Residential on property located at North 49th and Alvo Road.
Hi, I'm Roger Schwiesel, 1354 Pelican Bay Place, Lincoln, Nebraska. And I'm requesting a change of zone from ag to another phase of housing out at North Bank Preserve.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Swissow? Jane?
I think last time you appeared before us, we had a few questions about some of the drainage concerns that were brought to our attention by the neighbors, and I think you were going to come back to us with more information on how you have mitigated some of those circumstances.
Yes, we've actually, most of this water was caused by sump pumps. There was a hill there that we had cut down, and evidently the water table was quite high there, and they were pumping a lot of water out, and their backyards were not drying up where they could even hardly mow them. And we took and have run the water towards the front, the street side, and we're planning to install a pipe or to pick up this water and dump it into the storm sewer so it does not dump into the streets for the people there along the west side of 50th Street.
So were you going to, have you submitted these plans and proposals to the planning department so that
I think
they would be included in our packet for review, or?
They should be. Lyle Loth with Riggy Engineering designed it. I assume he's submitted it. I don't know that for a fact.
Okay. Cindy?
Thank you. Mr. Schuzel, thanks for being here tonight. Can you tell me a little bit more about running the pipe under the ground? Because I know that when I was out there, there were sump pumps flowing right into the street,
right,
which is of concern. And the storm drain is quite a bit down the street from where I was at, probably maybe a block and a half even. Yes. So can you tell me where exactly the pipe is going to be run from?
Right now it's shown about a foot behind the curb, which would be in the city's right of way, and it would be running underneath the drive. We're hoping to bore it so we don't disturb the lawns and the sprinkler systems. And in placing it there, the only thing we've got to cross is two gas lines that come from the east side of the street, so there would be nothing else that it would pick up.
So you're going to run it under the streets themselves?
What's that?
Driveways? Are you going to run it under the street?
No, under the driveways, behind the curb, okay, on the lawn side.
Larry?
Good evening. yes, we did hear a lot about concerns, and we're taking those pretty seriously. And so as you look to continue to develop out here, we hope to be more proactive about preventing some of these problems from happening again. Watershed Management has shared that they believe that the area was mass graded and constructed correctly, but that perhaps during the individual final lot grading there were problems. Do you have any role in the final lot grading?
We don't. Once we sell the lot, basically it's in the builder's hands. You know, there was supposedly the lots should drain at the property lines. People put fences in them, people raise them up putting mulch and stuff like this in them, and then the water doesn't drain where it's supposed to. I've actually got some pictures of one of the lots that's of a concern if you'd like to see them.
Sure, if you want to show them, but I guess I want to get at this question of if there's a way that you're able to partner with folks who are going to do a better job at some of this final lot grading, if that in fact is the source of the problem.
Well, actually, once the lot is sold, I really don't have any say in it, because then it's between them and their builder. And what's happened is the landscape people, instead of hauling off a few loads of dirt, have spread it out and not kept the drainage where it's supposed to be. Here's one particular one. This is Leanne and Pat Johnson's. Does that show up?
There it's going now.
Okay. The water is supposed to drain along here. There's a lot up here. And the water, whoops, I'm looking at it upside down. This is an empty lot here. This water is supposed to drain right down this line here. Okay. There's been mulch added here. Now, when you get a big rain, the water is coming across here and cutting across their lawn this way, and of course, it's bringing the mulch and stuff with it. Instead of the swale staying here, when this house got built, this swale got filled in. Consequently, this house doesn't have any trouble. This one over here, the dirt is so high against this house, it should have never got an occupancy permit issued, because it's right up against the siding, and the yard is just totally flat. Yet there's plenty of fall, if it was graded properly, that the water would get away from there. This drawing here was from 2013, before these houses were built, and you can see where there was a swale along here that come right through here where the water drained out. I mean, we specifically made that swale because we knew there was going to be a problem getting water out of this lot. You know, once we've done it, you know, there's no way that we can, you know, when you sell a lot, it's sold. Had I known they filled it, I would have hollered, because we did own the other lot on the other side there, but, you know, by that time it was sodded and everything else, and didn't know there was a problem until, actually, it was only about a year and a half ago the first I heard of a problem.
Mm-hmm. So Watershed Management also told us that this, you know, it's a very flat area, so there's very little room for error. Is there more you can do to communicate with the people who you don't oversee, but if you've done this work, you can communicate the plans that you've utilized to make it, to mitigate the water problems, so that there isn't a lack of communication? Is that something that you're able to do?
Like I said, the first I knew of this was about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago on this specific one. I'm actually new in development. This is my first project. If I knew what I know now, it would be different, but I guess I'm learning the hard way. But, you know, we've got reputable builders out there. You would expect them to know the rules and regulations also. And, you know, it's unfortunate that they're having problems, but most of that is because of poor lot grading.
So now that we're in this sort of phase 2, and you have more awareness of the complexities of the site, what might you do differently this time around if the change of zone is granted?
Well, what we've done with this next phase is the streets are all coming uphill, going higher, and we've picked up the lots. We raised the ground about probably 3.5 foot, And in doing this, we're done away with any basements. So they're going to be walkouts instead of basements. So there should be no water issues whatsoever with them. So, but we do have on Lyle Lote's plan, we do show the pipe coming all the way to Elvo Road and extending all the way to 49th Street if needed. So if we do encounter any water, because there are a few daylights up that road there yet, that we can pick that water up also.
John?
Yes, good to see you, Mrs. Swischel. When you do your grading plan as your developer hat, and maybe this is something for building and safety as well here, and I see we have a representative, is there something marked on plans before you get to the sales to the builders and so forth, so that there would be a written notice to them?
No, there isn't. The city codes say that, the drainage between the houses is supposed to be maintained, but that's the extent of it.
Well, just to follow up, Watershed shared that your engineer has agreed to amend the preliminary plat prior to the city approving the final plat for the 4th edition. Are you familiar with this?
I'm not.
Okay. Is Jared Nelson here? Okay. Well,
Jared Nelson with Public Works and Watershed Management.
thanks for being here tonight. We're all concerned about making sure people can live peacefully in this area without fear of these water issues. Can you speak a little bit about how we can prevent these water issues from occurring in the future?
Yeah, as far as the preliminary plat, we did have a meeting with Riga, the engineer for this development, in the end of July. And they're coming in with their final plat, which plats these same lots that's for the change of zone that's before you. And we expressed a few different concerns and said, we would like you to amend the preliminary plat and would like to review that and approve it before we do any more final platting, including final platting these lots here. I guess that kind of answers that question that you were just asking.
And that would take place after a change of zone has occurred, correct? That's not
right.
That's not okay.
Yeah, the change of zone, from my understanding, just changes the land use, and then they can't sell the lots until they final plat them. So.
Okay, thank you.
John.
Well, following up what my colleague just asked and you discussed, what's been the standard operating procedure, I guess, dealing whether it be watershed management and or building and safety and so forth? Because I can visualize having built a house, we put the swales in with our builder, but I'm trying to see where that communication is in the case, say I'm building another house and I've already got it constructed, another neighbor comes in and he or she or that family wants to build it up, and then that dumps the water back on me. Something in the system, is it there to protect everybody, to ensure, and not even just protect, but to prevent something like that happening, so that the builder, and as you're aware, a developer often creates those lots and then does sell them to different builders, so you do have a number of people, everyone's responsible, yet no one's responsible, it would appear. So how do we protect our citizens, as Ms. Baird was asking?
Well, one of the things that we've asked for to be shown on the preliminary plat is what we call directional flow arrows. Typically, when sites are graded, there's a grading and drainage plan, and on that plan they have to show contours and how the land is supposed to be developed. And if the land is 2%, if it's proposed to be graded at 2% or greater, that's great. That generally is steep enough that the builders can build within that, and it works. However, in this instance out here at North Bank Junction, generally a lot of the lots are about 0.5%, so less than 2%. And in those instances, we're asking for directional flow arrows, so basically arrows that get put on every lot line that indicate where the water is supposed to drain. And so we feel if we get those added on this plan, that it'll communicate to not only us and you and the developer and ultimately the builders and the landowners where that water is supposed to drain. In practice, we do get calls from the public about issues like this, and we go out and we explain, well, here's the grading and drainage plan, which shows the overall site patterns and how it's supposed to drain. And we, encourage people to work with their neighbors to follow those drainage patterns.
I know that back in the 1950s, way before all of you, maybe a couple of us, but my parents, the home we had, it was the backyard, half of it was way low, and the neighbors on either side had raised their property, and I remember my father saying, we couldn't raise ours because then we'd be dumping the water back on them, and so apparently there's some common knowledge of that, so every time we had heavy rains, we had a swimming pool in our backyard and in our basement. But I'm just trying to think, with all the developments that have occurred over the decades, has this ever happened in other cases?
It does. There's drainage issues of all shapes and sizes have occurred, it seems like, and there are plenty of places where it's very flat, and so maybe the drainage is supposed to go through your yard, but then when one person builds it up, it might push water onto their neighbor and cause a problem. And
I suppose you have you have the house built, and then you may have successive residents there, and maybe somebody wants landscaping differently, so they move the soil.
Yeah, in fact, there's one instance I'm thinking of where a landscaper came out and added, some plantings and big pine trees in the corner of a lot. Well, that was where there was a drainage swale. That was where the drainage was supposed to go, and so this landscaper essentially dammed it up. And so, meeting with the property owners and then showing them, well, this is supposed to be a drainage swale. I recommend, you work with their landscaper and show them that. And a lot of it's just simply educating the people.
Do landscapers file a plan of what they're doing?
No. I mean, generally after it's final platted, people can do what they want to do on their land. So that includes landscapers. Landscapers come in and they'll do grading, and we never see it or hear of it, and they're not required to do anything unless it's over an acre of disturbance.
Larian.
Just to make sure we all understand, you've got this review process built into the preliminary plat process, and if in fact these water mitigation issues aren't addressed properly, you can refuse to approve the preliminary plat, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Cindy.
Thank you. Well, it's at this stage in the process. When I was out there last week, it looked like there was dirt already being brought in. Is that appropriate during this stage of the process to have dirt being brought from outside into the area that hasn't yet had a zoning change and we haven't seen the plats?
It may be. The preliminary plat was approved, which had the original grading and drainage plan, was approved in 2004. And so they've been allowed to grade it per that plan ever since then. Subsequently, as they do that, they'll submit like a SWIP plan, and that gives them an authorization to do that.
So are they working from the preliminary, or you're going to be getting another plat?
Well, they should be working off the preliminary plat.
Which is 2004? And wasn't that when the preliminary plat was done for the area where they're experiencing the drainage problems now?
Yeah, I believe the whole area was originally platted back then. There have been many amendments over the years. Some of the amendments have adjusted some of the grading and drainage. I think actually the last amendment was in March, and I believe that did make a few changes to grading and drainage as well.
Thank you.
And I might also add that as they develop these areas, they'll final plat just pieces of it at a time, and so commonly, they'll do one piece and they'll final plat it, build the houses, and then they'll come back through with the next piece, and so it usually occurs in stages. All the different types of work, including the streets and the storm sewer and the grading, it's usually in clusters, and that occurs throughout in stages.
And I'm concerned because of the first phase that was built. There seems to be an awful lot of problems, and I don't want to exacerbate those problems, and I don't want to see us be able to create new problems in the other areas either. So thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you, gentlemen. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Yeah. Hopefully, John asked that the staff remain in case there's questions after this.
Good evening, members of the council. I'm Leanne Johnson. I will do this at the end. I had some prepared remarks, but I'm going to just put them aside based on what was just presented. I'm here tonight as a resident of North Bank Preserve. I have lived there since October of 2014. I absolutely love our neighborhood. It is a little gem in Lincoln, Nebraska that not a lot of people know about, and we really appreciate our Representative Cindy Lamb coming out, walking us through this process and helping us understand what we can do to bring our voice to the City Council and our concerns. I have to say that when I stand here and hear a developer say he's learning as he goes, it really, really makes me angry, because I have put good resources, I've put my hard-earned money into my property, into my home, and I don't want to hear a developer say, I'm learning as I go, because individuals that are going to be buying lots out there, they don't necessarily know all of the information that we know who have been living out there for several years. So learning as you go when you're a developer does not set well. And I hope as city council members, it doesn't set well with you either. We are residents of this community. We want to be a strong neighborhood out there, and we are. We know each other, we take care of each other, we know each other by names, we know each other's kids, we protect each other. And tonight we're here to share with you stories of what we have been dealing with for a year and a half with a developer who's learning as he goes. That just isn't, that's not right. That's not what our city wants in neighborhood development. So I'm asking that you consider delaying this zoning until a mitigation plan is submitted, that the developer actually sits down with current residents out there and has conversation about what his mitigation plan is and how we can work together on it. We are reasonable people out there. We are reasonable neighbors. All we're asking for is communication about how he's going to fix it, put it in writing, and then stay true to his word, because we've heard a lot of stories the last year and a half. So I'm asking that the council consider delaying it. I'm not anti-moving zoning from ag to residential, not at all. We want the development, but we want it to be done responsibly. And we don't want potential buyers to not know that there might be problems. And when you hear that it was plotted in 2004 and now it's 2017, and the grading's probably changed. I mean, I'm not the expert, I'm not the engineer in this, but seriously, I think there needs to be some kind of ordinance or some way that you're looking at. If something's plotted in 2004 and in 2017, you're going off the same grading, that doesn't equate for me. So I'm just asking you to consider delaying this until we really do get a mitigation plan. I was under the impression that I would be getting a mitigation plan and would know what that included, and I haven't seen that. So basically, I'm concerned about safety, standing water, water that's draining out into the streets, illegal curb cuts, elevation change, and the bottom line is I want communication with our developer. And I know there's other residents that probably have other issues.
Any questions? Cindy?
Thank you. Thanks for being out here, Ms. Johnson. So could you tell us first what's going on with your particular property?
My particular property, Roger showed up there. It's great, and if he wants to share it, he can put it back up because I think it's beautiful. But what the issue is our property is at 5017 Becky's Way, and there's an empty lot to the west of us. And then thank you, Roger. Appreciate it. So I can't talk and point at the same time, but so this is our property here. What Roger indicated is potentially that what we did with landscaping, which we did not change the grade, okay? is causing the problem coming through our property. In essence, the property next to us has put up a fence, so that probably has created some problems. The empty lot next to us, the grade goes down like this. My biggest concern is when it's sold, what's going to happen when they start digging basements, moving dirt? That's my concern for our property. So we have standing water that comes and stands in this apex right here.
When you say standing water, when it rains?
When it rains, sprinkler systems, primarily rain. Literally, it was probably a little over a year ago, we were having a neighborhood party. The realtors actually stood on our deck and looked at the standing water and said, "How long has that been there?" And we're like, "That's always there." And they said, "Well, we need to deal with that." Well, 2.5 years later, and it still hasn't been dealt with.
And so, and you indicated there's a lot that isn't yet developed?
Yeah, right next door to us is an empty lot.
Okay, is that the only lot in that phase that's undeveloped, or are there more?
I don't know. I think that's a part of the first phase, isn't it?
No, second phase.
That's part of the second phase. Well, there's also an empty lot right across the street from us that hasn't sold as well. And you'll hear about that lot.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to testify?
This is what I was talking about, the problem with the builders. No. There was a swale along his property line. It was filled in before they moved.
You'll get an opportunity at the end to,
okay.
to come back and talk to us. Okay.
Good evening, council members. My name is Mark Giesler, 7401 North 50th Street. I'm speaking in opposition to the rezoning of North Bank Preserve until issues are corrected. I'm speaking as a homeowner with a genuine concern for everyone that lives out there, all my neighbors. This is not just my house, it's everyone, because we're all a neighborhood. I have concerns with this issue that we as a neighborhood have been experiencing for over 2 years since I've lived there. Nothing has been done to show things are getting better or any signs of fixing the issues. My first concern in 2 years that I've been living there, my sump pump drainage has been moved 4 different times in an effort to solve the drainage issues. My backyard will have standing water for periods of time when we get the heavy rain, of course, even just the sprinklers going off, due to that the area is flat and there's nowhere for the water to flow. The back 10 feet to 12 feet of my lot is completely flat, which the water has nowhere to go, and it stands. This is after the ground has been saturated, it just sets. I was told by realtor and developer when purchasing my home that once the lots around me were developed, they would have a final grade. My neighbors have houses around them, and all of them supposedly have this final grade, but yet there are still water issues. My second concern, due to this most recent relocation of my sump pump, which is out to the curb, now some of the water drains into the street, which I wasn't notified of when it would happen or when it would be done. Now the water has saturated the area from the sidewalk to the curb, and essentially all that's happened is we've moved the problem 4 different times. So I'm still dealing with standing water. My sump pump runs about every 12 minutes. The water has to flow somewhere. I don't understand why it's so hard or how. I don't understand how or why it's so hard to figure out how to control the flow of water out in our neighborhood. Perhaps one thing that would help is if there were storm sewers in our area, as currently there are only 2, and they are a ways away from where I live. When I purchased my home, it didn't look like it does now up front. I have some pictures you'll see. There's standing water in the curb in the street every day of the week. It's an eyesore. I didn't buy my house that way when it looked that way, and I can guarantee you it probably won't sell looking that way. Because if I would have known it was looking that way, I wouldn't have bought it myself. If I ever want to sell, I'm going to have to understand the person will probably be turned off right away because of the eyesore. Another issue, because of all the standing water, there are bugs everywhere, and bug spray is ineffective out here because there are too many of them. My third concern is this proposed road that will be behind my house. The new road is almost level with my windowsill looking out my window, living room window. I'm going to just summarize this. The ongoing issue in our neighbors since I've been there has been newer houses are going up or built up higher than existing ones. This is the main issue out here. No one seems to take the blame for it, but continues to go on. I'm not an engineer. I'm a homeowner. But however, anyone could come out to our neighborhood, would be able to see whose house is older versus the newer ones, because you can just tell by who's higher and who's lower. And it's like a totem pole. We're getting everyone else's water. This problem has snowballed, and I'm worried because there currently aren't any houses behind me, but this new rezoning will allow for that. I don't know what's going to happen. I want to stand and be here today that I came and did my due diligence to speak because I'm concerned.
1 minute.
My home is a daylight lot, but all the houses apparently behind me will be a walkout, which means that water is going to be coming will have to go somewhere. Supposedly there's a proposed drainage ditch in between our lots. I have not seen any plans or know what exactly it will look like or who will be responsible for maintaining it. And I guess my overall question would be like, what is it going to look like and who's going to maintain it? Because I'd like to know what I'm getting into, I guess, because it hasn't been there. And I would assume it had to be proposed or somewhere in a plan. My number one concern is when the houses go up behind me, where's the water going to go? Because I sure don't want it. And I thank you for your time.
Cindy?
Yes, thank you. Did you say you had some photos for us?
Yes, I do.
Can you just put those up on the Almo real quick?
So this is my property right here. This is the back lot. This is the new area that would be where the houses would go. And I doubt you can see it on here, but you can actually see standing water on the curb right there. It probably won't fine tune. There's an area of water just standing in the back of my lot. It's ruined the sod already once. And that's why I've moved the sump pump 4 different times to try to avoid it. And then when they came and did take it all the way to the curb, this is what they left. That's my front yard. And then this is a lot to the north of me that's still undeveloped.
Could you turn that up? That's upside down to us. Thank you.
I just now saw a monitor right there. So there's standing water, and that's what I deal with on the north of me and to the west of me. And then here's what I mean by the standing water. So all my neighbors, I'm the furthest north house, so all the neighbors south of me get my sump pump water, and everybody's is going out there. So that's what it looks like, and that's why we have mosquitoes like crazy. And this is a close-up of the drain right by the curb. That's what it looks. That's the eyesore I'm referring to. If I saw that, I wouldn't have bought the house. I don't think anyone else would have. And then,
Excuse me, what, the drain by the curb, or?
What's that? This is, yeah. That's where it's coming out.
From your sump pump?
Sump pump.
Okay.
Every 12 minutes, water flows over.
Is that in warm and, rainy, wet, and sunny weather?
Yeah. That'll run constantly. I don't know. Some neighbors, sump pumps don't run hardly at all, and mine runs like every 12 minutes. So it's a lot of water. And these next 2 pictures, this right here is where the road behind my house, this will be 49th Street, I guess. You can kind of see the markers there. And then I just was trying to highlight, this is how much dirt was brought in. And it's like at least 4 feet. And that's what I'm referring to. It's level looking out my living room window. It's like level of the bottom of my seal. And I'm just concerned all that water, it's going to be a waterfall. If that makes sense.
Can you just tell me your address again?
7401 North 50th.
7401?
North 50th.
Thank you.
Yep. Any questions?
Questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next person. You can come to this microphone over here.
Hi, my name's Dawn Goldenall, 5010 Becky's Way Road. I'm speaking to you guys today on the zoning. I would like my concerns completed at high standard proper fix, not a temporary fix. And I would like the high standard fixes need to be placed and working properly before the zone change is completed. I'm talking about this lot right here. This is currently my house. It's very small, but it's right there. And I'm next to an empty lot. You can tell by this picture how flat the lots were before my house was built or anybody or the townhomes built behind me. And yes, those are my kids. One thing you will find on this lot, I was told by our builder that this electrical box was lower than the sidewalk, which is causing some of the drainage issues. This picture was submitted to the city on zoning change number 15026. And during that meeting, I was concerned about the safety issues with the electrical box and the utility boxes standing in water, that there was really no storm drains except for the one further down the road, and that there was only one entrance into the development. But my biggest concern is this, especially with my kids. As you can tell by this photo, the houses were built 5 feet above our property, and I was wondering how the city could allow this to happen when visually you can see that it was going to cause an issue. This picture also shows that the water does not go over the sidewalk. There was somebody that told us that the water will flow over our sidewalk and into the street, but you can tell that was not the case. This was during the same storm, and look how much water is standing by those electrical boxes and utility boxes. That's not safe in my books. Roger did come out, fix it. His temporary fix was putting a tube down our property lines of our property and the empty property or the unsold lot. And this is what we're dealing with on any day of the week, which also goes down our curb and goes in front of everybody else's property, house values, to the a culvert or drain, whatever you want to call it, past our neighbors, which is a long distance away. This photo right here is of a recent rainstorm in June of this year. You can tell that that tubing is not working. There is still plenty of water sitting there surrounding it. We've been trying to work with Roger. We're getting the pointing fingers. It's your fault. It's our fault. We weren't even in the house we weren't even moved in when the townhomes were getting built up. So to me, I felt like I was failed by the city, by the land developers, and just overall because I felt like I shouldn't have to deal with this issue, especially after 2 years of being out there. This is another picture of the electrical boxes and how things are flowing. I guess my concerns are, how can this be safe? Can you guarantee me 100% that no one will get electrocuted, especially my kids?
1 minute.
I guess where is the prop builder and safety helping adjacent, why isn't building and safety helping adjacent property owners? Who from the building and safety approves the sign off and then the grading of the elevation of the lots? Why wasn't storm drains put in? Why is there a bylaw or city code that prevents this from happening to any other property owners? Why is it that this additional expense is placed on the adjacent property owners? The city needs to make sure the building and safety codes are being enforced, especially the elevation and grading of lots. I have been dealing with this issue for 2 years now, and it needs to be resolved before somebody gets hurt. I'm not an engineer. However, these temporary fixes is not a solution. Thank you for your time. Any questions?
Cindy?
Yes, thank you. Thanks for coming out tonight. I can tell this isn't your natural forte, so thank you very much for coming. I just wanted to ask you about how often that you have that water running in your yard.
It's pretty much every single day.
Okay, so
Any rainfalls, like there was, I think last Tuesday, Roger came out and mowed the empty lot. He missed the stripped in back because it was wet. That night, my husband ended up taking a board, a dry board, and a tape measure, and it showed 1 inch of water was still sitting back there. So it's from the sprinklers going, it's from the rainfalls, pretty much any time. It's saturated. It's not drying up.
And how far away is the storm drain from your home?
Probably about 3 houses down. So you have an empty lot on North 50th. You will have the empty lot. You will have a house that's for sale. Then you have another neighbor's, and then his house is close to the storm drain or the culvert, whatever you want.
And does the water make it down to that drain?
Not all the time.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you very much. Next. Yeah, if anyone else is planning on testifying, would you please just come up to the front row up here and have a seat?
I am Cameron Vanal, 5010 Becky's Way.
Sir, could you repeat your name, please?
Cameron Vanal. I have some pictures. Here's one of the property, which is like 5 feet higher. So you can see all the water that comes from these gutters literally come down to our property, and even the other townhouses over here. It all comes down and then it flows back to right here.
Sir, is this the electrical service that the prior
right here's
testifier
electrical.
told? And that's
Yeah,
what the
this
prior.
is electrical. Yeah. Here's another picture without my garden I had put in, which I have a foot from the property over so water could flow. But you can see that it's just how it slopes. All the water comes down with all these townhomes. Comes here and it hits this fence and it comes this way. This neighbor here, before some pumps were fixed, his shed literally had tilted because of the water sitting. So it just literally brought it down. So like this last picture here, my future plan is to put a small shed here so I could put my mowers and stuff back there. But if I put a shed, how am I going to get it to not sink from all this standing water? This is the board that I took a picture of that was standing. You can see I'm stretching across the grass that was never mowed. And there's 1 inch of water sitting in this tall grass here. Every time it rains, we have water sitting back there. He's put the drain stuff in there. It's helped a little, but we still have that amount of water constantly every time it rains. So I don't know what can be done, but something needs to be done.
Questions? Cindy?
Thanks for coming tonight. I think when I was out in the neighborhood, there was a new piping put in or something that was coming out over the sidewalk. Was that your property?
No.
In front? Oh, okay.
My wife had a picture of just the pipe was a cutout.
Okay.
That's what he put in. But when it rains, enough rain, it's just like a geyser just pumping it out. And they can't keep up.
Where does it pump it to?
To the street. And it goes past our driveway. And then that one picture where you saw all the water just kind of, and it's literally got to go around and down the street. And during the winter, it's a skating rink there.
Thank you.
Okay. Next testifier, can you come up and use the other microphone here?
Good evening, members of the Lincoln City Council. My name is Kevin Nelson, and I reside in North Bank Preserve at 7310 North 50th Street. My wife, Rachel, and I moved into our custom-built home in March of 2014. Our general contractor was Mike McGill of Timber Ridge Home, who at the time was the only approved single-family residence builder for the development. During the first spring and summer we were in our new home, we noticed that our backyard was frequently wet, but we didn't have any issues with water in our finished basement. In December of 2014, the house just to the north of our property was finished. The builder of that home was Gerlach Construction, the same contractor you heard previously who built townhomes on significantly higher elevations than the homes behind them. The following spring, our backyard was more wet than the previous spring, and we started getting water into the basement corner, into the northwest corner of our basement, the corner closest to the house that was built. We let our builder know of the issue as part of our 1-year warranty, and his assessment that it wasn't his issue to fix because the development had little to no grade anyway, and that the house next door was built higher than necessary to push their water onto our property. In addition, 2 of the neighbors' downspouts were pointed towards the northwest corner of our house. Little did I know that this began an over 2-year battle of finger pointing between our builder, the neighbor's builder, and a developer that continues today. For the past 2 years, I've heard from my builder that the issue is Gerlach's fault because he built my neighbor's house too high. I have heard from Mr. Schwischel, Roger, and Gerlach that it is my builder's fault because he built my house too low. I've also heard from Roger that I needed to sue my builder. Please keep in mind that I didn't have a choice of builder because at the time, the only option if I wanted to live in North Bank Preserve was to build with Timber Ridge. Roger has also told me that the issue is due to the builders taking out the swale that Roger built along the property lines. First of all, I'm an accountant. I know nothing about water drainage or elevations. I don't even know what a swale is. I had to Google it today. I trusted that the developer and the builder would ensure proper drainage so I wouldn't have water in my basement and my backyard could be usable. I also trusted that the city building inspector would not approve an elevation that would not drain water away from my home. Secondly, if Roger had put as much time and money into building these swales as he said he has, wouldn't he have protected them and at the very least made sure that the builder and homeowner knew of their existence and importance? And at the end, if you're interested, I do have some pictures of this swale before I started building. Today, my wife and I are still dealing with water in our basement, as well as the associated mold to our drywall and carpet. We have a 3-year-old son and a daughter on the way. Our son loves to play baseball outside, but most nights, tonight included, we are unable to play baseball in our own backyard because it's too wet. I've resorted to mowing the common area behind our house on an almost weekly basis, because that area has enough drainage to allow my son and I to play baseball in a dry field. My family is tired of the excuses. We want a plan on how to resolve this problem. For 2 years now, we have heard stories from Roger and the realtors, ranging from they will take care of the issue and 100% of the associated costs, to there's nothing we can do. Just 2 weeks ago, Roger left me a message saying that for an estimated $3,000, he can have my backyard regraded. But when he came out to show me what he wanted to do, he admitted it won't solve the issue because the neighbor's water will still drain onto my yard and that even when regraded, there won't be enough grade for the water to flow properly. He told me that he would pay for half of the cost of this regrading, but he won't put it in writing. I have asked to meet with the subcontractor who'd be doing the work, and that meeting has not yet even been scheduled. In other words, I'm being asked to blindly approve a plan that will not fix the issue and then trust Roger's word that I won't be stuck with 100% of the bill for a project that won't fix the problem. I'm asking that you vote to postpone approval of this zoning action until such time that Roger has not only addressed but fixed my drainage issues as well as those of my neighbors. Thank you for your consideration of this matter. I'd also like to point out that all of the drainage that comes out of people's sump pumps that's being pumped to the front of their house is all coming past my house and creating one hell of a skating rink.
Cindy?
Did you say it had some pictures you wanted to show us?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Hopefully these will work. This is a picture of my house before the basement was even dug. This was about a week prior. The house you're looking at here that's being built is Leanne Johnson's house. And this is supposedly where these swales existed. And there was supposed to be a swale down the property line. Well, this picture is right on the property line. I don't see a swale. If there was a swale put there at one point, it was taken out as part of the street construction. In addition, if all these swales had been put in back when he said they did, wouldn't there be grass in this picture and not dirt? So keep in mind this is before construction of my house. Furthermore, the house next to me on this picture is flat. As it sits today, it is far from flat.
Sir, when you say flat, you mean the lot is flat, or?
Yeah, you can kind of see across there, it's level, but as it sits now, there's a house that sits next to me, and there's a rise that goes up now. That's kind of been the standard when Gerlach builds in this neighborhood. He builds his houses on a hump to force the water rapidly into neighbors' yards, which aren't moving the water rapidly.
Okay. Thank you.
Here's a picture of the mold in my basement. And here's a picture of the neighbor's drainage system being pointed right at my foundation.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next testifier, please.
Hi, my name is Al Ortmeyer. I live at 5027 Becky's Way Road. And I apologize because I just realized that this was happening today, so I have nothing prepared. I am here in support of my neighbors. I come from a small town. This is as close to a small town as I've got. It's beautiful. We were probably, I'd say we were kind of the godfathers of the neighborhood. We are about the 5th people in our environment out there, and it's beautiful. We have eagles, we have deer, we have everything. With every house that goes up, with every street that gets longer, things get worse. And it's sad. We live across the street from Cam and Dawn, and their kids play in the street. And at the end of the street, there's about a 20, 30-foot pool of water that's there every time it rains. I can't even tell you where the storm drain is on our street. You've been out there, Cindy. You know there's not. It's kind of silly for a new neighborhood like that. I mean, how does that get missed? But like I said, I'm lucky. My house is pretty good. Live right next to Pat and Leanne, and they're great. They're great neighbors. There's always been a swamp on the other side of their house. I mean, since we moved there. Anyway, if you have any questions for me, as someone who does not have a house that's directly affected by this, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. But I'm just here for my neighbors, so.
Questions for Mr. Oltmeyer? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
You bet.
Hi, my name's Pat Kappas. I live at 5017 Becky's Way. I'm the one that, I'll talk about it here in a second, the mulch and next to Al and the vacant lot. You've heard a lot of stories, a lot of empathy, some of us nervous, and because this is new and it's something we don't like to have to do, and I'm sure you don't like to have to hear it. But anyway, we want to get this fixed. The mitigation has to be taken care of before this gets approved, because anything further is probably going to further or make this a lot worse than it is. And that's our concern mainly. I mean, we are for the development. We want more neighbors. I think there's about 30 houses out there, and we know everybody by their name. So everybody that comes in enjoys it. We've had neighborhood things and get along real well. Roger referred to fences. There is one fence next to us that's causing part of the problem. The problem with that fence is his lot drains into it and it runs down the fence onto ours, and that's what's causing all the problem. We didn't have any water damage or problem until that house and his lot got filled in with dirt. Roger has told us water won't run uphill. We believe him, but he's not doing anything to make it go downhill. And the thing is that lot of his in the corner that causes our problem is he had dirt filled in there to make it even higher. When the house was built, that was next to Kevin, I wish I had the picture. But anyway, that's causing the water to come around. My mulch beds slope towards where the swale is supposed to be. It isn't that side of the mulch that's getting the problem. It's coming out to the middle of my yard. So anyway, that's that little issue. And that's not a major thing. I think probably for $1,500 it could be fixed. I can do it, but I just don't feel like I should be spending it for somebody else's lot, because that's going to be a problem when he tries to sell it. The grading, if you heard from Mark, that new road's going up. Roger mentioned it's 3.5 to 4 feet deeper or higher. It's going to go into a ditch in the back of all those houses there. And my question is, what's the ditch going to be? Before you approve it to residential, Is it rock? Is it cement? Is it dirt? Is it culverts buried? We don't even know, and he doesn't even know. He's told us that. We have meetings with Roger. We've talked to him, and he's promised us things. They don't get done. That's probably part of the concern, is this will get, the rest of this development get done correctly. So, you know, a little bit of a hold on it isn't going to kill anybody, to get the other things fixed up so we can move forward and have a nicer development out there than what we currently have. The common areas that he eventually wants to turn over to the homeowners, they're wet. He can't mow them half the time because it's so wet. I don't think they're draining right. And when the things like that don't come up and drain right, my question is, the city got the elevation right? Or is that a building and safety program that isn't getting the elevations on these houses inspected? We're making an assumption out there, and I think it is fairly accurate, though, that they're just approving them. They aren't doing anything with that. So Roger has told us, Roger currently and the realtors say there's 2 builders they'll use. Roger says, I only want quality builders out here to make this a nice neighborhood. And we thank him for that, and we think that's great. But the quality builders are causing the problems, and they're Roger's guys that he's handpicked. And so when we ask him, what do? He says, sue the builders. I'm not getting it. That just contradicts it. So someone along the line there where the elevation is done right, I'm sure we got to live with it. But my question is, if you've got a fairly level field, is what we heard from planning, if you got a fairly level field, why don't we have storm drains out there? You need more storm drains to get the water off the streets and out. Otherwise, they sit. And I addressed this to them in August of 16. I know at the planning meeting when this all kind of started, they said they never heard from us, but I had an email from, is it Gerald? From you, actually. So anyway, you know, I didn't think, well, there's anything we can do.
1 minute.
Okay. I'm the last one, so that's a good thing. So where are the storm drains? We need to know why we aren't getting better drainage on the individual properties from his hand-picked builders. So if you can, we'd ask you to delay and see what he can do to get these first things fixed before we move on, maybe complicating the problems that we currently have. And, you know, I don't know, I guess the city owns the streets, and I would be concerned about the ice and the water that builds up on those for long terms. And there's other people that had some problems, they're minor, they didn't want to come out. There's older people out there, there's families. But, you know, we're tired of having our neighborhood gatherings and everybody's talking about water. So hopefully after this it can be addressed, we can get them fixed and move on. So thank you for yours.
Cindy.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so you mentioned an email. You had an email exchange with somebody from, do you remember?
I did.
When
Mr.
was
Nelson.
that?
That was in August of 16 it came, and he just addressed individual lot stuff, but that's probably where I left it at that moment. But I can get it to you. I sent it to someone, and it didn't get there or whatever, and I thought it did.
Oh, that's fine. I just was wondering about
Yeah.
the date, because I know there was some conversation that maybe the developer didn't know anything about these problems.
Yeah, Planning Commission people did, or wastewater did.
Okay.
It was August 19th was the date. I got it on my phone.
And I think that you and I spoke about a meeting that involved the folks from wastewater, Ben Higgins, out there in your neighborhood, correct?
After the Planning Commission, Ben came out at the request of the engineering firm and stuff came out, and we showed and talked and went through much of what we just did here, and nothing really was done. You know, there was a result of, and Mark alluded to it, that Roger said he would do something with the sewer line, or the sump pumps, and he did, but it wasn't something that was a good fix.
Okay, and I think there was some discussion about the sump pumps not supposed to go out to the street.
Yeah, and they're right now out to the street. I'm not sure if it was explained. He brought them out, and then they have a pop-up drain, and then it just drains and goes over the curb, and it's an eyesore, one thing, and so he's got water there, so that needs to be corrected.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you. Any
Thank
other
you all.
questions?
Yeah, just to clarify, sewer was mentioned. This isn't a sewer problem.
Not a sewer problem, I'm sorry, that was a mistake,
Water,
yeah.
okay,
It's
all right.
not sewer drains, it's storm drains and sump pumps, sorry.
Okay.
Thanks
Very
for
good.
clarifying that.
Would anyone else
Been
like to
there.
testify? All right, Mr. Suisow, as the applicant, you have the opportunity for one brief
That's
rebuttal.
the staff questions.
We can do those after he gets to testify.
Yes. In trying to solve the water issues where the backyards were so wet, we brought the water out to the street. They do not want us dumping the water into the street. We are presently taking prices on boring that line like I talked about behind the curb, and all these lines that are coming to the street now on the west side of 50th Street will be picked up and dumped into there, which will dump into storm sewer. So, I mean, that is in the works.
All right, questions?
Yeah.
Carl?
Yeah, Mr. Suiso, we've heard from, I think unanimously from those testifying here that they would like a delay. Is that
I don't know.
Is that possible for you?
Well, yeah, it wouldn't kill us, but I mean, I don't know what bearing, we're talking a totally different project than what this is. I mean, you know, once, I don't know how I can go on private property and how, you know, it's basically the people that graded the yards when they finished building the houses that didn't grade it properly is why they're having the water problems. You know, where that fence is at, there should have been a swale there, and it's not there. How that becomes my problem because the people didn't grade the yard right when they finished grading, I guess I don't understand that. The Vodenoffs, that's a different story. That one there was my problem. What happened is, you know, it was draining in the backyard, and then the street elevation, in the next phase, they raised it up a little bit, and that the water didn't get out of it. I had talked to them about going in and tearing up their yard, putting a swale beside their house, because there is plenty of fall to take it out to the street, which the water would still run out, same as it does in the piping, it's just that it would come out faster. They didn't want the swale behind their house. And you can ask them, because I did propose this. That's when I put the pipe in with the drains coming out to the street. They have very little sump pump water. I don't think theirs kicks in very much because it's where theirs is discharging on the ground. It's not muddy all the time. But
they indicate that there are few, if any, storm sewer outlets, and
right, there aren't. Everything is, it's flat out there. You know, we've got a 0.5% slope on all the streets. And from where the low point of the street is to the bottom of the outlet of the storm sewer, there's probably only 2 foot 4 inches of depth. I mean, we're that flat. You know, ideally, we should have had more slope on it, should have been raised up a little bit higher. But I mean, the house, you know, like the one that they were talking about where their backyard's not draining, there's plenty of room that it could have drained if it had been, the builders would have graded the yards like they should have been. Because, I mean, if there's plenty of elevation to make it work. But it's hard to do once you've got a fence in there, you've got landscaping in there, you've got sprinklers in there, you've got sod in there. How do you go in and correct something that the builders didn't do right?
okay. There was also a question about between the existing, or some of the existing homes and the newer homes that are going in, that there will be a ditch going through there.
No, that's why we took the water to the street. In the backyards, here again, where there's only 0.5% fall. You know, so, you know, there's really no way to put a ditch in. But in a normal rain, you're going to have some water standing for a little bit, but it shouldn't be very long. I mean, it will drain or soak into the ground, one of the two. But the new houses going in should affect these no more water come from the new houses going in than what's coming there right now, because you've got the same amount of slope that's coming to this area as what you will have after it's developed.
Cindy?
So you're planning to take the water to the street on the other side as well?
No, it's you know, the lots are already raised up, so all you've got is the back slope of the lot, which you've already got right now today coming that way. So there's not going to add any water to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and here also, we did show on this drawing that Lyle is turning in for this drain. If we did have water problems, we're going to bury another line out there by the curb before the houses get built, so that the sump pumps, if they have problems, could tie into it. It's mainly the sump pumps that's been kicking out so much water on the ones on the north side of the street, or the west side of the street, has caused the problems.
So, because I was out there on a dry day and there, it was wet.
That
I mean,
was
I was out,
probably
it wasn't a
before-
storm, I'm
That was
sorry.
before the sump pumps got taken to the street.
No, I was actually out there, there were some pumps shooting water into the street. So, yeah, this was just a few weeks ago, so,
And then that was probably lawn sprinklers.
and then my understanding was that, that Mr. Higgins had informed you that you shouldn't be bringing those sump pumps out to the, out of the curb cut without at least approaching planning department first, and then you went ahead and did that anyway.
I did, yes.
Okay, and so,
They've got people all across the city of Lincoln have got drains coming out there. And we figured on picking ours up with the storm sewer.
so I am a little concerned that he told you and then you went ahead and did it anyway, more than a little concerned probably.
We were trying to help the residents out, and I guess it didn't work.
Okay, so I did want to ask you about the builders. Are you using the same builders for these next phases? Is that your plan?
Yes, and they are quality builders. You know, we are going to be trying to work with them more on elevations and stuff. You know, once a lot's sold, I really don't have anything really that I can say about it. I can make suggestions, but I can't control what they do because I don't own the ground after their lots are sold.
So you do still own quite a bit of property in this neighborhood. It sounds like you have some empty lots in the neighborhood.
There's 2 empty lots is all there is.
Okay, and one of the concerns was on the lot, the corner lot at Becky Lane.
Right, and that's the one that there should have been a swale where that fence is at and their landscaping is at. That's not there, and so the water's cutting across their lawn catty-cornered instead of going down the property line where it should be going.
So, are you the only one that can approve builders?
Actually, my realtor is the one that has been selecting them. I've had nothing to do with the builders. I don't know him. He's the one that has gotten the builders for me, for the development. Basically, they're selling the lots. Most of the houses are designed by the builder and the realtor. I don't have any input into the houses.
Mm-hmm. And are you the one bringing the dirt in
Yes.
from outside?
Well, it's from on the same property, yes.
I'm sorry?
It was from on the same property.
So I guess I'm wondering how do you propose that we take care of these folks? And to what degree are you willing to work with them before we start approving more housing going on out there? And then a few years from now, here we are with a multitude of people with similar issues or these folks with worse issues.
I had actually offered to pay for half the cost of fixing it before today. I'm not sure that I'm still going to do that now because I was trying to work with them, and this is the thanks I get for doing that. Yeah.
Jane?
Mr. Schwissau, can you tell us exactly what your engineers are recommending? Because they should have the right tools to be able to determine the appropriate fix. Maybe it's putting in those stormwater drains and creating the appropriate drainage ditches. I don't know. I'm not an engineer, but I've done a lot of construction, so I rely on engineers to give me guidance on the appropriate remedies for situations like this. So what have they been telling you? And have you, I was hoping to see some drawings at this meeting that you have a mitigation plan already in place to address some of these concerns. And you can understand why the neighbors are very reluctant to see any further development go forward if you don't have any engineering drawings that shows them and everyone else that these drainage issues are going to be dealt with going forward. So what are the engineers telling you about a remedy for the existing lots that you do somehow have some oversight and grading, and it sounds like there is some selection and restriction process on the builders that they are permitted to choose?
Well, for the existing lots, other than tearing out a fence and taking the sod out and grading it like it should be, there is no remedy. There's not enough fall any place that you could bury a storm sewer and make it drain. I mean, it's just that the dirt was graded wrong when they finished grading the house.
And that's what the engineers have told you and provided that documentation to the
Yeah,
city?
Along 50th Street there, we're going to bury that line to pick up the sump pumps, because the sump pumps is a big factor there that's causing a problem. On Leanne and Pat's lot, that's strictly an issue of being the lot graded wrong, because there's plenty of fall from the empty lot in their house to the back to drain it. And the same thing with Kevin's. I mean, the fall is there, it's just that the builders didn't haul off 4 or 5 truckloads of dirt. They spread it out instead of hauling it off and getting the drainage that should be there. Kevin's house, the dirt is right up against the siding. I don't know how it even got passed for occupancy permit, because you're supposed to have 6 inches of fall in 10 foot away from your house to meet code. And he doesn't have it. I mean, his whole yard is just virtually flat until it gets to the back, and then there's all kind of fall. Well, not all kind, but there's a good 1.5 feet.
So when you sell the lots, don't you have language in the sale documents that specify that this is the grading that is required for these lots to help assist with?
No, there's nothing
Okay.
like that in the contract.
Okay. Any other questions, John?
I appreciate your comments on that, because I was sitting here listening to the testimony, and I was just wondering if it wouldn't be possible, as you sell the lots, as you're the developer to the builders or whomever, that there couldn't be language in there that the plan of landscaping or not landscaping itself, but what you've done on grading wouldn't need to be followed to protect the whole plot or whole area.
We could probably work with Lyle and put some elevations on each lot property line or something. That's Lyle with Rig Engineering. That's who I've been working with. I mean, basically the grading plan matches what was submitted and approved by the city. I mean, the
From the
thing,
existing homes or this new?
Oh, for the existing homes. And everything worked and drained before the houses were built. And they come in and by not hauling off a few loads of dirt, have taken away the drainage. Kevin's house is lower. The one, what happened, some got 8-foot basements, some got 9-foot deep basements. They put a 9-foot deep basement in, so they jacked the house up higher. Of course, and that pushes the water on the neighbors, and his is really low compared to the one beside of it. It probably shouldn't have been a 9-foot basement in there, but I don't know how, unless somehow in a contract you could list how high the elevation can go, but I mean, here again, it should have been drained. Between each house, you're supposed to have a swale, and the water is supposed to go to the property line between the houses instead of cutting across the yard. And this is what's not happened.
Okay. Thank you very much. There are some staff questions that Mr. Camp has.
Could we have building safety come forward?
Thank you, sir.
And planning, eventually.
And there might be some for law, too, on what could be done in documents.
Chad Blahan, Building and Safety.
Thank you for waiting and being here. I think you've heard most of the testimony on this subject.
I did. I didn't come down here for the beginning of it, the initial, and I actually know next to nothing about the property. I was here for the next couple of items, but I just happened to be here with some fortune, I guess.
Well, do you have any thoughts or comments on what you've heard on this situation, and as things go through your department on plan review, whether it be by the developer and the whole?
Well, I tried to organize my thoughts a little bit on this from what I know about the development process, and like I said, I know next to nothing about this specific. I haven't been out there, haven't seen any of that. It looked like a fairly flat section of ground, and those are always tricky for both the designers at the beginning part and then the builders when they get the lots, because what looks great on the preliminary grading plan, you got these nice neat lines and arrows that shows where the water is supposed to go. Once you start digging, it ends up a little bit different because those grading plans don't take into account foundation spoil. They don't take into account different landscaping maybe that the builder wants to put in for the homeowner. They don't take into many of those things into account. So by the time we get there, some lots do have drainage arrows, or maybe a lowest opening if it's next to a floodway or floodplain, that sort of thing. So those are some things that our department can look at. And I don't know if these are areas that had those or not. I don't know what the final plats look like. Don't really know anything about it. You know, our guys our building inspectors are very talented at what they do, but you know, they're typically ex-framers. They're not landscape people, but they know enough to look at, to try and look at which direction the water is going. And they try their best to work with the builder to maximize a best case scenario once they're out there. However, they don't have any control over what happened previously, how the land was mass graded to start with before they started building, and they don't have much control over you know, what the builders choose to haul off or not. They just try and do the best with the work that is there. And I heard mention about the requirement 6 inches in 10 feet or whatever, that the slope falling away from the foundation was, and it's not the siding, it's the foundation. There was a reason, and I don't know if this is the case, but there was a recent one where we had to go out there, and that was the complaint that the soil went up to the siding. Well, if you peeled the look behind the vinyl siding, you had about a full 6 inches of foundation underneath that siding, and so they did meet that grading requirement. I have no idea if that's the case here, but our inspectors do try and look for that. And I mean, keep in mind, they're the last step from this in the city's process with the development. It starts, I mean, good drainage starts with good design to start with. And then it starts with accurate grading based on that good design, and then it starts on builder responsibility to try and continue that grading. So I guess if there's any specific questions you'd want to know, I mean, we can, if the desire is to have city take a much closer look at these grading issues, I mean, every step that's added slows down the building process. We can call in engineers to come in and get their transit levels to look at some of these grading elevations. We can maybe require more certifications on the builder's side of things, since we don't employ a certified surveyor or licensed surveyor. There's a number of things that have been looked at over the years, but by and large, the process that we have works most of the time for most developments.
Go ahead.
Chad, I have a question for you. So when a developer brings their plans and proposals to you, typically, don't they have all the civil engineering done for their development, how the streets are going to be laid out, where the storm water drains are going, that will be in conformance to what is probably good design? And certainly if you know the elevations of a flat piece of ground, that means you have to take extraordinary steps or additional steps to make sure that water has a way to move if it's adding additional stormwater. I guess what is so surprising to hear is that these problems are pretty prevalent, you know, in this development, and it seems like they knew from the beginning, not necessarily the property owners, but the developer and the builder, because it's flat ground. And so I go back to, what are the civil engineers for this development? What have they done? What are they proposing for the future parcels that they would like to sell? I mean, if they're not mitigating the current problem, or if they didn't have a good civil engineering design, which you said it starts with a very good design on how to move water over flat surfaces, it doesn't sound like there's very many guarantees for these future lots that they would like to develop if there's not a good plan in place. And I feel that it doesn't sound like there is a good plan in place, and it doesn't sound like there was a good plan in place working with the flat ground from the very beginning. I don't know, because I keep saying I'd like to see some plans, I'd like to see the mitigation plans, but we have not seen any civil drawings, and it doesn't sound like your department has either, or have they?
Well, we don't, I mean, we're the last, the development drawings happen well before we see them. They happen through the preliminary plat or CUP, whatever planning document takes place, and those are reviewed by some folk.
Here we go. So I have a question, because I've had this conversation with some people in planning and in stormwater. So it comes down to this, as far as I can tell. You tell me if I got this idea wrong.
Okay.
When the area is plotted and it's time to say, okay, we can build these lots, there's a watershed management plan, correct? And that's the last time the city controls water. Is that right?
I think that is, generally speaking, that is accurate as far as the process is concerned.
So after that, when builders start building, we don't go in as a city and say, have you followed the watershed management plan as you built this home?
Correct. We do have a building occupancy, there's a building
Right.
permit process, but there.
Watershed management doesn't go back in and say, yes, we certify that you have followed the plan that was in place.
That is accurate.
Okay, so basically what I'm hearing is the city has failed these people. And what I would like to see is the city professionals, that's you and your departments, to make a plan so that we can avoid this kind of stuff in the future, because we make plans and then we don't follow them. And if we do follow them, it seems to be by accident, because nobody goes back and inspects to see if it's done.
A couple comments on that, and I think there might be also some more information that might help this discussion right now. One is that, to a degree, we do depend on private contracts and citizens to do the right thing in the case of building lots and grading them in an appropriate way, generally in compliance with that initial grading plan. So I think we need to keep that in mind, that there is some expectation on the private side that they do what they're supposed to be doing. Having said that, I do think that there is perhaps some more information that we can provide you, and Jared has that information as far as discussions that have been going on with Riga, the engineer involved in this project. And that has to do with trying to deal with moving forward with any further development in this area of doing it the right way.
Are we going to solve this tonight?
I would say that we probably are not going to be completely solving the issue tonight.
So the request of what do you think of the request of the homeowners to delay this until we can look at a plan? Because Jane's right, we haven't seen anything in writing.
Haven't seen anything.
And actually, as part of that discussion, I actually would want to bring Jared back up here, because I think the part of this is understanding when plans can come in.
Go away.
I
Run,
think,
Chad,
David, when we last had the discussion and we talked about the delay, it was with the intention that they bring forward to us a remediation plan and a program before we would take up this matter and consider it again until there was something in place. And I thought that was, they were working with the planning department and
I think there has been work done, and Jared can speak to that in more specifics, but I think the main purpose of delaying and having this hearing now was to make sure that there's an opportunity for the residents and homeowners to have their chance at a public hearing. So there still was purpose for tonight. So
no, I'm not arguing that, but from our perspective, we wanted to hold the public hearing open to get their input. But in addition to that, we wanted to see the remediation plan that was stamped and certified by a civil engineer, that this is going to make progress on the problems we're seeing.
And I will hand off to Jared now.
So we don't have a plan that's certified and stamped by any professional yet.
Okay.
There has been a conceptual plans. I guess I'll bring up 2 points. Okay. One is that there has been a conceptual plan submitted by Riga, the developer's engineer, to install a drain behind the back of curb, as Roger was describing, and that would run parallel to the street so that all the people could tap their sump pumps into that. And that would alleviate the issue of the water getting out into the street from the sump pumps It would alleviate the issue of the water running down the street from the sump pumps. It would go into that pipe, and then that pipe would dump into either an inlet or a big drainage ditch that's there. So they submitted a conceptual plan, and we've looked at that, and it looks good, and that's all we've gotten so far for that. The second point was that I met with Riga. They've submitted a final plat to final plat these same lots, and I met, in reviewing that, and I was at the Planning Commission and heard a lot of the same issues. So we met with Riga at the end of July, and I said, we're not going to approve this final plat. In fact, we want you to amend your preliminary plat, and here's some issues. And I could go into those if you want, but essentially we said there's issues, you need to show us how you can address those. We have not seen that administrative amendment. They have not yet addressed those issues or shown us how they will address those issues. We're still waiting.
Okay.
Okay, other questions? Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd like to hear sort of, if you're still waiting, what is your recommendation to the council about proceeding?
I think that the change of zone just approves the land use, and so you could approve that tonight, and we'll still, wait. We'll still will not approve the final plat until we get their revised preliminary plat and are okay with it.
I would agree with that.
Sure. And that will come back before us, or what is that?
The final plat would not come back before the city council. It would go through an administrative process at that point. But that the understanding is that there's this necessary information that's needed for that to be approved.
Okay. Cindy?
So, but meanwhile, they're moving dirt and they're working on off of the plat that hasn't been approved. We don't have a final plat, and if they're moving dirt and they're building in there, we don't have a final approval yet, even though you're waiting for it, there's work going on. I just have some concerns about that. If we delay, as they've asked us to, if we delay the zoning for land use, then my understanding is that there shouldn't be residential building going on there until there is such a zoning change.
Well, I think we're talking about two different things here, but there's different phases. So they have approval for building out the first phase. That's already in place. It sounds like there's a few lots that are still unbuilt. What we're dealing with the change of zone right now is for the next phase.
Yes.
And what Jared referred to is that there also is a final plat that needs to be approved as well before they can take that step for further construction of houses. As far as grading is concerned, because there's a preliminary approval out there for the entire development, that just like initially the grading was done before there was a final plat, there's some ability to do some of that work. I don't know the details of what is happening out there, but there is, I'm assuming there's some type of dirt movement that's based on the other approvals that have happened.
Okay, Benny, and then John, then Cindy again.
I'm sorry, I had one more question.
Okay.
Jared, I'm sorry. Do you have a time estimate for the drain that you were talking about at the curb?
No, I don't believe we received an estimated time.
Okay. Yeah, Benny?
Quick, thank you, Mr. Chair. If there's a preliminary plat approval, they're moving dirt around. If that doesn't mean they can start building without your approval of the finalized plat, right? They can move dirt all day long, and until you get a plan that you think will fix the problem or mitigate water on your neighbors, you won't sign off on it, and nothing will get built. Is that fair for me to say?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, John?
We've got two situations here. One, we have the current homeowners, residents who are there, and then we're talking also about the future expansion of this area. Sure. Regarding the citizens there, and I believe there are a total of 2 unbuilt lots. Did I?
And that's what we heard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a way, and this might be for building safety again, but is there a way to earmark those so that when they come through the process that they get closer scrutiny for any landscaping or what have you, so that within this current plat that it doesn't aggravate or contribute to further flooding to these people?
I think we made the point that we don't even look at that.
I mean, within the system, it's technically possible to flag a property, or at least an application.
they're gonna have to get building permits.
Pardon?
They'll have to get a building permit.
Right.
So it's coming before you.
If it comes to us, it's feasible or it's possible to flag that application and put a hold on it, so that it doesn't move forward. However, we don't currently require final grading plans, which is what would be required for us to have somebody look at. Probably be looking at some other folks with that expertise to make sure that it meshes with the rest of it. And also you'd have to, in order for that to be worth much, you'd have to probably have it surveyed to verify what the actual elevations are out there to determine whether or not that final grading plan was worth.
Okay, Larry?
Excuse me for a second. I was just, by flagging, I meant that we have an extra approval to make sure it has the proper landscaping and that the builder and or first owner know that. There's some else.
I think the point I was trying to get to earlier is there's no such mechanism in city code.
They have to get a bit, but I'm asking from the city standpoint to not let the present situation get more aggravated, and so through the building permit process for a home, for the builder.
But what I'm saying is once the watershed management plan is approved for the whole development, there is no requirement for the city to require anything on watershed management for an individual lot to be built.
To answer your question, Don, yes, it would be possible for us to put a hold on that application if, we're, I guess, told to do so. I don't know that there's anything in our code that really gives us the authority if they meet all of the other requirements for us to not issue that permit. If you've got city services and a paved street and it's a platted lot, it would be difficult, I guess, legally for us to not issue that permit if they've met all of the requirements.
Wouldn't that owner, and I apologize, but I'm thinking back to growing up and my father just saying we couldn't build up because then the neighbors could sue us because we put water on their land. Would it not be a similar case here with these other two lots? If anything, if they didn't do proper drainage, that they could be liable to the existing neighbors, not that they've got a nice family of people there, they don't want to sue one another, but I'm trying to get the buck to stop somewhere.
I think the part of this might be a legal question formally at this point, but that does fall more into the private side matter of you don't want this to happen, but one property owner A going in the litigation with another property owner because of what they did. I mean, that's the area that we go into in that sense. It's not where we want things to go, but that is, generally speaking, what would be needed for some type of resolution on that side. It's a private matter at that point.
Okay. Larry?
Going back to kind of planning commission days, recalling developments that are in the floodplain and how they have to build up to a certain height, I can't help but think of that as I see these photos of newer homes being constructed at higher elevations. It made me wonder if is this area part of the floodplain or what? So that's one question. The second question is, you mentioned this is sort of a private sector issue, but what do we do to try and prevent, private homeowners from causing, collateral damage for each other by the elevations that they choose? Is that watershed? Is it planning? Can you help us understand where we work to? I mean, clearly this could happen anywhere, pretty much in the city. Why is it happening here?
I could probably speak to both of those. A lot of this area, if not most all of it, was in the floodplain, and they raised it to get it out of the floodplain. There's a process you can go through FEMA to get the official FEMA map changed once you do that. Yeah, I mean, it's not in the floodplain anymore, but at one point it was, and that could likely explain some of the, frequent sump pumps running, as there's probably some, black dirt down beneath some of the houses.
And just to add to what Jared just said, I mean, that there is also, if that is to happen, there is a mitigation plan for that, and that would have been done initially as well. Mm-hmm. So it's not like they just take it out of the floodplain and use up flood storage. It's got to be mitigated in some way.
Did that happen here? I mean, this doesn't look like an area maybe that's properly lifted out of the floodplain. Can you speak to that?
In this specific area, they raised the lots to be up out of the floodplain, and they submitted a certification that each of the homes would have a specially designed like sump pump system, essentially, to help, so that the groundwater wouldn't get into the basement. And so there's a process when someone takes a land out of the floodplain, you can get a letter of map revision from FEMA, and so you have to submit that documentation to FEMA. And when it's based on fill, when someone's bringing fill in, the city, we have to review that and sign off on it. And so in this instance, that was the process. They did a LOMAR, letter of map revision, based on fill. It came through to the city, we reviewed it, and we asked that a building restriction agreement be placed on all of those lots, stating that they're not allowed to build their basements beneath a certain level. And the city does that so that we can be sure that those properties in the future will be reasonably safe from flooding. And so that process was followed, and there is a building restriction agreement on those lots with those details.
Do you think they got the elevations correct? I mean,
that's something that is checked, and I would speculate that they are. That's something that we check throughout the process. And building and safety, as Chad mentions, when there is a lowest floor elevation on the plan, they'll check that.
Okay.
And your second point that you brought up, could you remind me again what?
Well, I mean, what do you do when you have, people living next to each other building at different elevations? I mean, that seems like that's just a recipe for trouble.
Right. So within the city, we don't have explicit code, to my knowledge, that talks about that. It's like when we go out and meet with people, we explain this is a civil matter. You should work with your neighbors to resolve this. And I'm not a lawyer, I don't know, but my understanding is that generally case law dictates that you can't change the course of water onto or off of a property.
Right. I had a lengthy discussion with Ben Higgins on this subject, and the fact of the matter is, as I was explained to me, is if my established home and my neighbor's established home, my neighbor does landscaping that pushes water onto my property, there is no city ordinance that applies. None. Whether it's a new construction or an addition or a landscaping change, the city has nothing, no hook to hang our hat on when it comes to this kind of matter. And that's where I mean when I say the city has failed people. We don't have an ordinance where we can enforce water management at the homeowner level, period.
I think there's some common law principles, though, that...
But they don't apply to city ordinances. That's what I'm trying to say. People can sue each other, but the city can't give them relief. We don't have any ordinances.
If I may, there's also a consideration here that, and this has come up as part of this conversation, which is, as part of our process for approval, we go through and we try to be as efficient as possible. And to some degree, there is that balancing act between how we get approvals done according to our established regulations, obviously, but being efficient at the same time. And the good news is that this type of severe situation like this doesn't happen very often. But when it does happen, it doesn't help those private property owners very much to feel any better about that. But we do get into the situation of trying to process our approvals so that we can get building to happen as quickly as possible as well. So there's definitely a balancing act here. And if we're going to talk about some type of intervention here at the last minute, there is going to be a cost to that as well, on some side or all sides, whether it be in time, whether it be in the cost of doing individual surveys, which is very costly, which we try to avoid that as well. So just put that out for consideration too.
Okay, other questions? Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
That concludes our public hearing. We can move into the voting session. Public hearing ordinance's second reading are items 19 through 38. Public hearing ordinance's third reading, item 39 Change of zone 17011, introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
We need a second so we can delay this. Moved by Jane, seconded by Carl. Discussion. Cindy?
Thank you. I would like to move for a delay on this. I would like.
Second?
That's what we need. Yes.
Thank you, because I always go right into my discussion. Thank you so much for.
And could you define your delay?
Yes, I would like to delay for 4 weeks. I would like to have an opportunity to have an engineering study of some sort, as Jane had mentioned, and I'm hoping that Mr. Schwezo will see his way clear to do that. I would also like to know the timing of the underground piping that's going to go to this to drain the stormwater. We are the final gatekeepers. And this is a beautiful part of our community, and I've been out there, and they have a couple eagles that live at the end of the block, which is kind of cool, not affected by this, but anyway, very, very nice area, wonderful neighborhood, and they don't want to sue their neighbors, and people don't want to move in there buying lawsuits, and knowingly or unknowingly, and I think we have an opportunity just by delaying this. I mean, I was torn, do I just say no, let's vote no, or do I delay? These folks aren't in any way adverse to having new housing out there and having new neighbors. They welcome that. They just want to make sure that this problem is going to be solved and it won't be aggravated, and there doesn't seem to be really a way to bring accountability, as Councilman Christensen has pointed out. And so hopefully this will do that we'll get some kind of a mitigation plan, that it'll involve at least the knowledge of the homeowners that live out there and are dealing with this, and cause some communication, and then come before us the next time that we meet on it. So.
Okay, further discussion on the delay.
Cindy, just for clarification, do you
Yes.
want continued public hearing?
I think we would have to continue the public hearing to just allow the engineering
Make
study.
sure.
Or are we able to do that with just staff? I don't.
I think it's prudent to continue public hearing.
Okay, thank you. I think yes.
All
Continue
right, so
public
delay
hearing.
4
Thank
weeks
you.
with public hearing. Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Ordinance's third reading. Item 40 is adopting a new chapter 24.12, Lincoln Plumbing Code, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Carl, seconded by Jane. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 41 is adopting the plumbing systems permit fee schedules for the plumbing code, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Carl, seconded by Jane. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 42, adopting a new chapter 25.06, Lincoln Mechanical Code, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Carl, seconded by Cindy. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 43, adopting a new chapter 24.8, Lincoln Hydronics Code, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Carl, seconded by John. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 44, adopting a new chapter 25.12, Lincoln Fuel Gas Code, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Carl, seconded by John. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 45, adopting the mechanical systems permit fee schedules for the mechanical code and the fuel gas code, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Carl, seconded by Jane.
That should be me.
Discussion? Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 46 is approving the transfer of funds to allow the city to pay off obligations with the Nebraska Department of Transportation on the South Beltway project, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Carl, seconded by Cindy. Discussion.
Can we all second that one?
Yay.
Yes.
Yay.
Yes.
Let's just call the roll and say we're all happy.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 47, approving supplemental agreement number 3 between the city, Lancaster County, and Nebraska Department of Transportation for the South Beltway project, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Carl, seconded by Cindy. She beat you, Jane. Discussion. Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Resolutions on first reading are items 48 through 57. Our pending list date certain, item 58. Our pending list are items 59 through 61.
Before I entertain a motion to adjourn, I've asked Cindy to address an administrative matter.
Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you for reminding me. So our performance audit committee request, due to some administrative snags, it did not make it on publication. So we'll be having that on first reading next week, but we'll also be publishing that it will have a hearing. And we'll be taking action that night, moving to suspend our rules, yeah.
Okay, that's just for everybody's information.
Now it is time to move for adjournment.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Jane.
I think I lost that one.
Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.